I've come to terms with the fact that everything I know is a dream. As a preface, please note that this will probably be very long. I don't care if anybody reads it, everybody in the world could read it and nothing would change. I just need to voice my concerns for my own sake. Perhaps by organizing everything on a page, I can make sense of things. Several years ago, I was in a brutal car accident. I was parked in front of a train track waiting for the train to pass by. I was the last person not to make it across the tracks, and for visualization there was a solid stream of cars on either side. If I had tried to sneak across, I would have rear-ended the person in front of me before successfully clearing them. I could hear the train approaching and the black and yellow bars lowered in front of me. I am fascinated by trains, so I was delighted to be so close. Finally getting a front row seat, The train was about a quarter mile from crossing when the driver behind me accelerated to nudge me forward a few feet. The bars bent and eventually snapped, and I was knocked joltingly onto the tracks. I panicked and threw the car in reverse, trying to back out. The other car apparently had more horsepower, however. And to my horror, my car door aligned perfectly with the cattle guard on the front of the train. I scrambled to get out of the car, but forgot about my seatbelt. I nearly strangled myself trying to get free. By the time I unlatched it, it was too late. One fraction of a second of the loudest sound I've ever heard. And then blackness and silence. I was certain that I died. I didn't feel any pain, and certainly if I would have survived, I'd be in agony. I tried to open my eyes, but nothing would happen. I tried to make a sound, to wiggle my fingers or do anything, but I couldn't. It wasn't that I was paralyzed, it was more like I didn't have a body to manipulate. I was just a mind submerged in a pool of nothing. The only sentiment I felt was that I had returned to the state after being gone for a long time, like forgetting how your parents' house smelled until you visit their home for the holidays. Gradually, I started to have feelings and sensations. Passing waves of warmth and wetness finally allowed me to determine where the edges of my body were. Almost as soon as I became aware of my physical self, it began to ache. I felt as if every inch of me had been pummeled with a baseball bat, like the heavy wooden kind. Even opening my eyes was a spectacular ordeal. I was in a hospital, so I had survived after all. People moved to surround me, and faces that never fully came into focus hovered above my own. And the sounds that vaguely resembled speech seemed to reach me through water. It wasn't long before I felt weak again and closed my eyes. This fading in and out of consciousness lasted for what felt like a very long time, maybe months, though the doctors told me it was only a matter of days. After that, I worked on speaking and swallowing food, which seemed silly, but it was actually quite challenging at the time. Finally, as more and more casts were removed, I was allowed to sit up and turn my head, for which I was incredibly grateful. According to my family and my then girlfriend Sarah, all of whom were overjoyed at being able to speak with me, I was asleep for several days on end after the crash. I remember Sarah specifically saying she had missed being able to stare into those beautiful eyes. Time passed at an excruciatingly slow pace until physical therapy finally escalated to the point where I could be pushed around in a wheelchair. The doctors were surprisingly hopeful that I'd be able to walk again, but it was what they call a cautious optimism. Nobody wanted to tell me that I'd be independent again and then have to admit that they were wrong later. Obviously, I was very hopeful myself, though even transferring from chair to bed was a painful challenge. It was around that time that I had noticed that I never dreamed anymore. When I slept, I only felt the same nothingness that I felt immediately after the crash. All the days blended together for a while after that. The next memory I actually separate from the rest is the first time I tried walking on my own. There were staff members holding onto my arms and waist just in case I fell, and With their help, I made it all the way across the room on my first try. The doctor said that they had never seen such a rapid recovery, and I was giddy. Obviously, I wasn't out of the woods yet, but soon I was allowed to live at home again with frequent physical therapy sessions. And some weeks after that, I even returned to work. Life was almost back to normal for a while, except for a very slight limp in my left leg, the side where the train hit me. I was feeling pretty normal. It was only about a month of living on my own that weird things started to happen. The first thing I noticed is that I felt the occasional sting on my right forearm, like a thin needle was puncturing my skin. It was a tiny prick, maybe twice a day at most, and I figured it was just nerve trauma or something, and I blocked it from my mind. Feigning ignorance was harder to do when I started hearing things, though. While I was reading in bed one night, I thought I heard Sarah crying. I strained my ears to make sure, and I definitely heard her sobs, but very distantly, like I was submerged in a pool. I made my way downstairs quickly, concerned that she had hurt herself or something, but she was just washing dishes in the kitchen. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously.
"Yeah, why?"
she asked nonchalantly. "No reason." I dismissed these oddities the best I could. After all, how could anyone expect to recover from being hit by a goddamn train without some lingering effects? Every so often, mostly when I was trying to fall asleep or sitting in a silent room, I would hear the occasional sounds that I couldn't connect at first. Gradually, I determined that they were hospital sounds, like stretchers being rolled across tiled floors and beepings from machines and rapid chatter between nurses and doctors. Although I figured anyone who had suffered as much trauma as I had would be experiencing some degree of whatever I was experiencing, I decided to bring it up with my doctor. He told me it was perfectly normal for someone in my circumstances, and he could prescribe me a sleep aid if I felt it was necessary. I told him it wasn't a big deal. I was just satisfied that the doctor could explain some of my symptoms. The odd glimpses of what seemed to be my past only increased with frequency. When I slept, I finally dreamed again, but it was always the same thing. If I saw anything at all, it was a hospital room. Sometimes there were people in the room, and sometimes I was alone with the machines. There was one night in particular in which the dream seemed more vivid and gripping than usual. My eyes opened wearily to see Sarah asleep on the chair beside my hospital bed. "Sarah?" I croaked. She jerked awake.
"Henry!"
She scrambled to my side, clutching my hand, and at this point it occurred to me that I was dreaming. I stared right into Sarah's eyes. "I'm asleep right now." She seemed concerned.
"No, Henry, you're finally awake. I'm right here. It's been so long."
"Of course you would say that. You're a part of my dream," I smiled, amused. "I'll probably wake up any second." But as I spoke, the familiar soreness caught up with me all at once. It practically knocked the wind out of my lungs.
"Henry, no!"
Her distress was now evident.
"I don't know what you're talking about. Stay with me, Henry. Stay awake. Look at me."
I shook my head defiantly and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in my own bed. It was about 3 in the morning. I sat awake, pondering what I had just seen. I thought I heard Sarah crying again, even though I could see her sleeping beside me. When Sarah finally woke up, she rolled over and laid her arm across my chest.
"Good morning, big guy."
She smiled groggily. "If I was asleep right now, what would you tell me?" I asked.
"What? That's kind of heavy stuff to drop on a sleepy person."
"Just bear with me. If I was asleep right now, dreaming, would you tell me?"
"Well, I feel pretty real,"
she noted, patting different parts of her body.
"Do you think I'm not real?"
"Of course not," I said. We got ready for our day. I couldn't stop thinking about my dream, though. I noticed that when I tried really hard to space out my work and listened closely enough, I could hear the hospital sounds more clearly. I was naturally concerned about this. That night I went to bed early, and just as I thought, I was transported immediately to the hospital bed. I felt the thin sheets beneath my fingers. I opened my eyes, and Sarah was reading a book in the same chair as before. I just looked at her for a long time, trying to discern if she was real. She certainly seemed real enough. She turned the pages with the same flourish that she always had, and she chewed on one of the temples of her reading glasses. Eventually, she looked up and met my eyes.
Oh, you're awake again. Victoria! Paul! He's awake!
My parents entered the room moments later, looking excited. I talked with all of them for a long time. Of course, my parents too denied the fact that I was asleep, but that topic passed quickly. Instead, we discussed my condition. I had been in a coma for almost 3 months with little response. They had been slowly losing hope for my recovery until my brain showed signs of activity. Since that time, they had been visiting me frequently, hoping that I would wake up. It seemed a pretty convincing story. After many hours of talking, I had to stop. I was legitimately sleepy. Of course, they all understood and I fell back asleep, only this time, I didn't wake up in my own bed. I woke up in the same hospital bed a few hours later. I had to think about it for a very long time, but eventually concluded that I must have imagined my miraculous recovery and I had been in a coma the whole time after that. As you can imagine, it was hard to accept at first. Since then, I'd been making a second recovery, which had been slower and less successful than the first. That's why, for a long time, I was mostly convinced that I'm really awake this time. Nobody walks after getting blindsided by a train, at least not without lots of hard work. I've still only left my wheelchair on crutches, and it's been 6 years. It probably sounds like a bittersweet ending. At this point, I agree. I was prepared to live happily ever after in my wheelchair, maybe even graduate to crutches someday, except for one thing. When I'm getting ready for bed and I turn off my lamp and my head hits the pillow, I can still hear them, the faint sounds of a busy hospital. I know that many of you will say, but I'm real, this is real life, of course you're awake, but that's what you're supposed to say. Nobody's gonna tell me, I'm fake, you are dreaming, wake up. I'm still asleep, and I've learned to deal with it. I know that nobody I meet during the day is real, but I'm tired. So I just pretend. And that's what I have to do. "47 new messages. I just kept running, faster and faster, until my muscles throbbed like an out-of-control dial tone, until the electricity in my legs subsided into sharp spasms of pain. I ran down the winding, semi-abandoned street until my lungs burned and my heart pumped pure sulfur. I might have screamed, or maybe my voice just sputtered into a metronomic hum. I don't know. I can't really remember. I ran until I just couldn't run anymore. By the time I stumbled into the back alley behind an abandoned strip mall, I couldn't even remember why I'd started running in the first place. Quite frankly, I couldn't remember anything. The few remaining memories of that morning felt fuzzy, distant. I could remember crawling out of bed with a throbbing migraine. I could vaguely recall showering, shaving. Hell, I could even remember the scorched menthol aftertaste of an early morning cigarette. But then, nothing. Everything after that became a blur of half-remembered sounds and images, a bottomless black chasm in my mind. I glanced at my wristwatch and almost gasped. 2:56 p.m., a 6-hour gap. My memories felt distant, ephemeral, lost in white noise of exhaustion. I kept trying to piece everything together, but just grew increasingly frustrated and confused. What the hell is going on? I braced myself against a grimy, cement-covered brick wall, trying to catch my breath, but I just couldn't take it anymore. My muscles became rubbery and unstable. I collapsed upon the hot asphalt, bending over in a fit of coughs, weaves, and dry heaves. The sun beat down on my back, and my head ached. The stink of garbage and taste of bile made it damn near unbearable. I felt terrible. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. A small gray rectangular object lying next to an upturned trash can. Spears of sunlight reflected off its surface and made it strangely over-illuminated, almost ethereal. For a second, I stared at it in a captivating silence. The lights off its surface bore into my eyes as I got up, wiped myself off, and went over to pick it up. It was a cell phone, one of those old flip phones, all scratched up and barely held together. As if in a trance, I bit down and picked it up. A weird, unnatural heat radiated between each scratch and ridge, as if they were all deep, infected wounds. The cell phone felt half broken and fragile, but seemed to momentarily bind itself to my flesh, as if it was a part of me, as if it had always been a part of me. The front screen displayed a single ominous message. 47 new messages. I don't know why, but I became unbearably curious. Why would an out-of-date cell phone tossed aside with the early evening trash have so many voicemail messages? Why had it been abandoned? And why did I feel this strange compulsion to keep it? Hell, to treasure it like some lost artifact. Even then, I seemed to subconsciously know that this old flip phone was somehow connected to my 6-hour gap in my memories. I felt like some invisible force had led me here. God damn it. I just couldn't help myself. I opened up the phone, dialed *86 and listened to the voicemail. Oh God. If only I'd known. If only I weren't so curious. If only I could have broken the goddamn trance, snapped that phone in half and thrown it away. But I didn't. And this is what I heard.
First, new message.
A loud, throaty scream, frantic and full of terror. A cacophony of cries mixed with the gurgle of spit, blood, and bile. The faint trace of a whimper near the end. The voice sounded tiny, lo-fi, and almost distorted, and yet it also sounded oddly familiar, like it had belonged to an old acquaintance I hadn't heard from in years.
Second, new message.
The same voice, only now the screams were muffled and intermittently punctuated with terse, terrified sobs. The sickening crack of bone, snapped in half and breaking through soft, supple flesh. An explosion of panicked screams, and the stomach-churning sound of a body being ripped apart.
Third, new message.
Swift staccato burst of sobs, the sudden squelch of flesh grasped and torn apart as if it was a flimsy sheet of cellophane. A metronomic hammering sound that steadied into a sickening pulse. Distortion, static, human pain. The constant thud grew louder and louder. Everything, shrouded in an unbearable electronic hiss.
Fourth, new message.
The crackle of static, the breaking of bone. The same broken voice fading into a strained choke whisper rasping in my ear. A sad, sickening series of sobs in a single plea.
Don't let this thing take me. Please. Don't listen.
A shriek of static. Dead silence. I wish I could tell you that I listened to all 47 messages, that I stood there and listened until I had discerned from these disturbing, disconnected recordings some sort of cohesive narrative. But I'm a coward, and I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the phone shut before I could get any further. A cold, nauseating numbness went through my body, and the air grew stale, poisoned. I felt like I was going to throw up. Someone whose still familiar voice reverberating in my ears, that had been torn apart, eviscerated. Was this the source of my memory loss? Did I experience some trauma connected with these messages? Oh God, did I watch a man die? Or did I do something? Something I wanted to forget? Panicked, I tried to find some rational explanation for the horrible collective of messages. Hell, I tried to figure out some sort of way that this might have been some sort of sick practical joke, but even then, I knew that this was real, that I couldn't just close my eyes and walk away. I opened up the phone and looked through all the incoming calls, and as I suspected, all 47 of the missing calls came from the same number. As far as I could tell, those were the only incoming calls this phone had ever received. It almost felt like this phone had been designed solely for the purpose of conveying to me this strange and perverse series of messages. I took a deep breath. With shaking hands, I pulled up the number and pressed send. The phone rang in my ears as I waited for someone to pick up. My pulse quickened into a white-hot frenzy. My palms were slicked with sweat. The surrounding shadows grew into a inky black veil that momentarily shrouded every corner of the abandoned alleyway. 3 rings, then a 4th, and then a familiar clicking sound. But before I could say anything, a harsh, rumbling voice bursted out.
A ghost of signal, lost in the geography of flesh and silence. Forgotten. A ghost.
A wave of distortion. Forgotten words cocooned into white noise. An unbroken stream of language. The voice sounded lost, blinkered, blanketed in a harsh crackle of electricity. But like the sound from those 47 messages, it too sounded oddly familiar. I tried to listen carefully to figure out who it was, but the static crackled and hissed like thunder, frustrating this attempt.
The circuitry of desire, an electromagnetic warmth of flesh, desire.
Hello, I whispered. I still couldn't identify the voice. Can you hear me? But the voice croaked on, becoming more and more familiar as the static gradually subsided. I tried to listen closely.
The desire of our nation, the desire for this broken machine of blood and bone, this prison of communication, it has been far too long.
I found this phone and wanted to talk.
It is happening again. It is happening again. I will soon perhaps. One more time.
Who is this? Do you know who this phone belongs to?
A prison antenna, a satellite signal. But it is happening again. It will be soon, perhaps. You know this.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Don't worry. You will. You will.
At that moment, I knew that the sudden sinking realization who I had been speaking with. Beneath the blanket of white noise, the voice became familiar. It was the same voice that had screamed and stammered for mercy in those voice messages. The same voice that had grown hoarse during its final plaintive sobs. It was the voice of the tortured and the torturer. The broken victim and the battling madman. But it was also a voice I'd heard all my life. It was my voice. They were all my voice. This thing was speaking to me, now with my voice. And then I felt the pain, a thunderous jolt of electricity, the sensation of bones crackling, tendons snapping, flesh ripping open into jagged red ribbons, and a slow trickle of blood and viscera seeping into my eyes. I could hear the horrible sounds of my body breaking into 1,000 pieces. I felt violated, carved open, emptied out little by little, the cracks and scars infiltrated by a miasmic electromagnetic fog. I couldn't tell if this pain was real or imagined, and I don't care. My knees buckled, and I howled in pain. I screamed. I screamed until I couldn't scream anymore. In a fit of desperation, I violently tossed the phone into the hot asphalt, and the pain abruptly stopped. I became frantic, confused, scared, and I desperately wanted to get the hell out of there, so I ran. I just kept running, faster and faster, until my muscles throbbed like an out-of-control dial tone. until the electricity in the legs subsided into sharp spasms of pain. I ran down the winding, semi-abandoned street until my lungs burned and my heart pumped pure sulfur. I might have screamed, or maybe my voice just sputtered into a metronomic hum. I don't know. I can't remember. I just ran until I couldn't run anymore. By the time I stumbled into the back alley behind an abandoned strip mall, I couldn't even remember why I'd started running in the first place. Quite frankly, I couldn't remember anything. No, that's not true. There was an echo of a memory, the dull sensation of déjà vu lingering like a ghost. The past receded into a dull ache, a tangled collage of sound and image shrouded in the fog of static. I glanced at my wristwatch. 3:22 p.m. Almost 7 hours. I braced myself against a grimy, cement-covered brick wall, trying to catch my breath. I clutched my chest and broke into a violent coughing fit. I felt confused. Broken shards of memory cut microscopic incisions in my brain. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. A small gray rectangular object lying next to an upturned trash can. It radiated a weird spectral glow in the shadows of the alleyway. It too seemed oddly familiar. The half-forgotten memories became less faint, less impressionistic. But still, I couldn't help myself. As if in a trance, I bent down and picked it up. A weird unnatural heat radiated between each scratch and ridge as if it was all deep infected wounds. The cell phone felt half broken and fragile, but seemed to momentarily bind itself to my flesh, as if it were part of me. As if it had always been a part of me. The front screen displayed a single ominous message. 48 new messages. Be weary of the house decorator. I don't know where he came from, and I've never seen him before in my area. A couple of months ago, I stepped out of my house and a ragged man was next to my car and he shook my hand.
Hello. I would like to decorate my living room with your letters of unpaid house bills,
he told me. There was something about his voice which made me weak, and he simply walked off. After that first meeting, I got a call from my boss and he sounded a little strange, like he was being controlled.
Hello, Martin. I'm firing you because you need to start receiving letters about unpaid house bills, so that the decorator can put it up on his living room walls,
my boss told me. I tried calling him back and got nothing, and when I took my company to court for unlawful dismissal, the judge seemed like he was being mind-controlled, and the same with the lawyers. The judge told me that it was for a good reason that I had been fired, so that I could start receiving letters about unpaid house bills for the decorator to decorate his walls. Any job I applied for, they would all reject me for the same reason, which is that I needed to start getting letters about unpaid house bills for the decorator's living room walls. As I couldn't find another job, I started receiving bill payments for water and heating, mortgage, electricity, and tax, which all quickly added up. Then those letters disappeared and I got a letter from the decorator which read, "I have received enough letters from you about your unpaid house bills, which look nice on my living room walls." I was finally able to get a job, but then the decorator randomly met up with me at a supermarket and he said,
"My front room walls will look nice, with newspaper clippings that are about the death of your family."
And then he simply walked away. I contacted the police and told them everything, but they simply told me,
"Of course your family needs to die, because the decorator needs newspaper clippings about your murdered family for his front room wall."
I'm so terrified. I'm so happy and relieved that I received a death threat letter. A couple of months ago, I received a life threat letter, and this is what the life threat letter read as followed. "I'm going to bring you back to life where you'll be forced to pay bills constantly. Bills like water bills or electricity bills, energy bills, food bills, rent bills, and bills just to stay alive. I'll force you back to life where you'll be drowning in debt with bills. As I read that, I couldn't believe that I was dead, because only people that are alive receive death threats, and so logically people that are dead must receive life threats. To be forced back to life where I must do all the things that living people do was nauseating and made me tremble. Why would this stranger be so cruel to bring me back to life and back into this rat race? Then I received another life threat letter, and it read as follows. I'm going to bring you back to life where you'll be forced to get a soulless job that you'll hate, where you work with a terrible manager and equally depressed but nice coworkers, but they too will be the same situation as you. You'll get up in the morning feeling like weights are on top of your body. You'll be dreading all of the times that you're on your days off and will be constantly worrying about work. The commute to work and back will be just as horrible. I will enjoy bringing you back to life. I started to shout and cry at the thought of being brought back to life. Why would this horrid person do such a thing to me? Why can't he just let me rest in peace? Then another life threat letter came to me, and it read, I will bring you back to life, and you will be among shallow and fake people. You'll go to parties that'll increase your anxiety, and you will be among people that'll force and pressure you to live a certain way of life. They will make you feel horrible about yourself. I couldn't take it anymore. I was trapped. Then at the last minute, this person sent me another letter, which read, Sorry, I accidentally sent you a life threat letter, and this was supposed to be a death threat letter. I'm gonna murder you and then feed you to the dogs. I was so relieved and happy that instead of this person bringing me back into this rat race of life, he's instead gonna help me escape it. I don't really understand why I'm not funny. Nobody ever laughs at my jokes, and I've always dreamed of becoming a comedian, but I guess I have to let that dream go. Here are 3 examples of how I found out I wasn't funny. Last week I told a guy this joke. I like my Oreos like I like my victims, drowning. And I started laughing my head off, but he wasn't laughing. He was just begging me to let him go. But I told him many times that someone has paid me to kill him, and I decided to throw him over the bridge, which is the main reason why I told him that particular joke. The second person I told the joke to was this one. You know, it's only considered murder if there's a body. Otherwise, it's just a missing person. And I started laughing my head off, but the other guy was just silent. I just decided to kill him because he owed money to the wrong person. Then I cremated him to get rid of the evidence, which is the main reason I told him that joke. The third person I told the joke to was this one. You know, getting murdered is the most intimate experience you're ever going to have. I said to the lonely man with no kids or wife. I was being paid to kill him as well. He didn't laugh at all. I guess I'm just not meant to be funny. Our teacher doesn't call us by our real names, but by our future potential. I have a teacher at school that teaches a variety of subjects, and he's generally well liked, but the only strange thing about him is that he doesn't call any student by their real names, but by their future potential from his opinion. He comes in class and starts doing the register.
Potential murderer.
Teacher shouts at Colin, and Colin raises his hand because he knows it's him because the teacher always calls him by that name.
Potential burglar.
Teacher shouts out and Brian puts up his hand, as he has been called that many times by the teacher.
Potential psychopath.
Teacher shouts out and Emily puts up her hand as she knows it's her because the teacher always calls her that.
Potential cannibal.
And I put up my hand because he always calls me that. He has something for everyone, from potential freak accident to potential evil genius, and I admit it was fun at first, but now I just wanted him to call me by my real name, which is Joshua. On another day, our teacher starts by doing the register as usual. He calls everyone by their potential names and not their real names. Then he calls Colin by his real name, and we were all shocked. I asked Colin why our teacher called him by his name and not potential murderer anymore, and Callan told me that the reason our teacher doesn't call him potential murderer anymore is because it's not potential anymore, it's real. Colin actually murdered someone. He murdered some homeless man because he knew it would make the teacher call him by his real name. Colin then told me to take a bite out of the dead guy by ripping some flesh out and cooking it, as it was the only way to make the teacher call me by my real name. I took a chunk out of the dead guy, and he hadn't been dead for long. I cooked it and ate it. The next day for my register, the teacher calls me by Joshua because I'm not a potential cannibal anymore, but a real one. The first day of school. Everyone loves the first day of school, right? New year, new classes, new friends. It's a day full of potential and hope before all the dreary desperations of reality show up to ruin all the fun. I like the first day of school, but for a completely different reason. You see, I have a sort of power. When I look at people, I can sense a sort of aura around them. A colored outline based on how long that person has left to live. Most everyone I meet around my age is surrounded by a solid green hue, which means they have plenty of time left. A fair amount of them have a yellow-orangish color to their aura, which tends to mean a car crash or some other tragedy. Really, anything that takes people before their time, as they say. The real fun is when the auras venture into the red end of the spectrum, though. Every now and again I'll see someone who's basically a walking stoplight. Those are the ones that get murdered or kill themselves. It's such a rush to see them, knowing that their time is numbered. With that in mind, I always get to class very early so I can scout out my classmates' fates. The first kid that walked in is basically radiating red. I chuckled to myself, too damn bad, bro. But as people kept walking in, they all had the same intense glow. I finally caught a glimpse of my rose-tinted reflection in the window, but I was too stunned to move. Our professor stepped in, and he locked the door. His aura a sickening shade of green. My brother Charlie. I hate it when my brother Charlie has to go away. My parents constantly try to explain to me how sick he is, that I'm lucky for having a brain where all chemicals flow properly to their destination like undammed rivers. When I complain about how bored I am without a little brother to play with, they try to make me feel bad by pointing out that his boredom likely far surpasses mine, considering he's confined to a dark room in an institution. I always beg for them to give him one last chance. Of course, they did at first. Charlie has been back home several times, each shorter in duration than the last. Every time without fail it all starts again. The neighborhood cats with gouged eyes showing up in his toy chest. My dad's razors found dropped on the baby slide in the park across the street. Mom's vitamins replaced by bits of dishwashing tablets. My parents are hesitant now, using last chances sparingly. They say his disorder makes him charming, makes it easy for him to fake normalcy, and to trick the doctors who care for him into thinking that he's ready for rehabilitation. They say I'll just have to put up with my boredom, if that means staying safe from him. I hate it when Charlie goes away. It means I have to pretend to be good until he gets back. This old new house. We bought an old house, my wife and I. She's in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom, for instance, while I'm on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it is brutal, but it's oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel, similar to your skin when you're peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kind of make a game of peeling, on the hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner section of paper in every room is a person's name and date. Curiosity got the best of me one night when I googled one of the names and discovered the person was actually a missing person. The missing date matching the date under the wallpaper. The next day I made a list of all the names and dates. Sure enough, each name was for a missing person with dates to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out a crime scene team. I overheard one of the ticks say, "Yep, it's human." Human? What's human? "Sir, Where is the material you removed from the walls already? This isn't wallpaper you're removing. Guardian. He awoke to huge insect-like creatures looming over his bed, and he screamed his lungs out. They hastily left the room, but he stayed up all night shaking and wondering if it had been a dream. The next morning there was a tap at the door. Gathering his courage, he opened it to see one of them gently place a plate filled with fried breakfast on the floor, then retreat to a safe distance. Bewildered, he accepted the gift. The creatures chittered excitedly. This happened every day for weeks. At first he was worried they were fattening him up, but after a particularly greasy breakfast left him clutching his chest from heartburn, they were replaced with fresh fruit. As well as cooking, they poured hot steamy baths for him and even tucked him in when he went to bed. It was bizarre. One night he awoke to gunshots and screaming. He raced downstairs to find a decapitated burglar being devoured by insects. He was sickened, but disposed of the remains the best he could. He knew they had just been protecting him. One morning, the creatures wouldn't let him leave his room. He laid down confused, but trusting as they ushered him back into bed. Whatever their motives, they weren't going to hurt him. Hours later, a burning pain spread throughout his body. It felt like his stomach had been filled with razor wire. The insects chittered as he spasmed and moaned. It was only when he had felt the terrible squirming beneath his skin that he realized that the insects hadn't been protecting him. They had been protecting their young. Hell. There was no pearly gate. The only reason I knew I was in a cave was because I had just passed the entrance. The rock wall rose behind me with no ceiling in sight. I knew this was it. This is what religion talked about, what man feared. I had just entered the gate to hell. I felt the presence of the cave as if it was a living, breathing creature. The stench of rotten flesh overwhelmed me. Then there was the voice. It came from inside and all around.
Welcome.
Who are you? I asked, trying to keep my composure.
You know.
The thing answered. I did know. You're the devil, I stuttered, quickly losing my composure. Why me? I've lived as good as I could. The silence took over the space as my words died out. It seemed like an hour went by before the response came.
What did you expect?
The voice was penetrating but patient. I don't know. I never believed any of this. I uttered. Is that why I'm here? Silence. I continued. They say the greatest trick you ever pulled was convincing the world you don't exist.
No. The greatest trick I ever pulled was convincing the world that there is an alternative.
There is no God? I shivered. The cave trembled with the words.
I am God.
Next time you'll know better. Have you ever walked into a room and found a vampire? No, not the sexy kind, but the foul creature with bony limbs and ashen skin. The kind that snarls as you enter, like a beast about to pounce. The kind that roots you to a spot with its sunken, hypnotic eyes, rendering you unable to flee as you watch the hideous thing uncoil from the shadows. Has your heart started racing, though your legs refuse to? Have you felt time slow as the creature crosses the room in the darkness of a blink? Have you shuddered with fear when it places one clawed hand atop your head and another under your chin so it can tilt you, exposing your neck? Have you squirmed as its rough, dry tongue slides down your cheek, over your jaw, to your throat, in a slithering search that seeks your artery? Have you felt its hot breath release in a hiss against your skin when it probes your pulse? The flow that leads to your brain. Has its tongue rested there, throbbing slightly as if it savored the moment? Have you then experienced a sinking, sucking blackness as you discover that not all vampires feed on blood? Some feed on memories. Well, have you? Maybe not. But let me rephrase the question. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgot why you came in? The accident. It was 1 a.m. and Guy Halverson sat in the dark living room. He hadn't moved for over an hour. The accident earlier that evening kept playing over and over in his mind. The light turned red, but he was in a hurry and accelerated. An orange blur came from his right. In a split second, there was a violent jolt. Then the bicyclist rolled across his hood and fell out of sight on the pavement. Horns blared angrily and he panicked, stepped on the gas and screeched away from the chaos into the darkness, shaken and keeping his eye on the rearview mirror until he got home. Why did you run, you idiot? He'd never committed a crime before this and punished himself by imagining years in jail, his career gone, his family gone, his future gone. Why not just go to the police right now? You can afford a lawyer. Then someone tapped on the front door, and his world suddenly crumbled away beneath him. They found me. There was nothing he could do but answer it. Running would only make matters worse. His body trembling, he got up, went to the front door, and opened it. A police officer stood under the porch light. "Mr. Halverson?" asked the grim officer. He let out a defeated sigh. "Yes, let me..." Before he could finish, the officer interrupted him. "I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your son's bike was struck by a hit-and-run driver this evening. He died at the scene. I'm very sorry for your loss." The Fallen. People started falling from the sky by the close of the decade. They were never clothed, always naked, and always with a petrifying grin on their faces. It had been just a few at first, but then hundreds and thousands would fall at a time, destroying cars, homes, blocking off highways. Strange discoveries were made upon research. They were human, but lacked any blood, intestines, or even a heart. No one could explain the hideous grins they had, or even where they came from. It was a woman in Costa Rica who made the latest and most disturbing discovery. She recognized one of the fallen bodies as a long-dead relative, one who died back when she was a teenager. Then more and more identifications were made. Soon people were picking out their long-dead loved ones among the video feeds, cadaver piles, and crematoriums. No one could explain why they were coming back, and even falling from the sky. Even more distressing, after disposing of the bodies, it wouldn't be long until the same body came plummeting from the sky again. You couldn't get rid of them. People were getting killed by higher volumes of falling bodies. And soon after burial, they too began to fall. My mother was killed when a body landed on her car, crushing her. Next week, the news reported on a body that had gotten lodged in an airplane windshield. I saw my mother's grinning face, the happiest I'd ever seen her. They say when hell is full, the dead shall walk the earth. What about heaven? There's no reason to be afraid. When my sister Betsy and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbed the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings, Betsy and I would wake up, and on each of our nightstands we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them there, worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. She just wanted to take care of us. Among the house's old furnishings was an antique wooden chair, which we kept against the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied, watching TV or playing a game, Mother would inch the chair forward, across the room, towards us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, long after we'd moved out, I found an old newspaper article about the farmhouse's original occupant, a widow. She'd murdered her 2 children by giving them each a cup of poisoned milk before bed. Then, she hanged herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse's living room, with the woman's body hanging from the beam. Beneath her, knocked over, was the old wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room. They got the definition wrong. It's been said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Now, I understand the sentiment behind the saying, but it is wrong. I entered the building on a bet. I was strapped for cash and didn't really buy into the old legends of the hotel to begin with, so $50 was more than enough to get me to do it. It was simple. Just reach to the top floor, the 45th floor, and shine my flashlight from a window. The hotel was old and broken, including the elevators, so that meant hiking up the stairs. So, up the stairs I went. As I reached each platform, I noted the old brass plaques displaying the floor numbers. 15, 16, 17, 18. I felt a little tired as I crept higher, but so far no ghosts, no cannibals, no demons. Piece of cake. I can't tell you how happy I was when I entered the last stretch of numbers. I joyfully counted them aloud at each platform. 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 44. I stopped and looked back down the stairs. I must have miscounted. So I continued up. 44. One more flight. 44. Down 10 flights, 44. 15 flights, 44. So it's been for as long as I can remember. So really, insanity isn't doing something repeatedly and expecting different results. It's knowing that the results will never, ever change. That each door leads to the same staircase, to the same number. It's realizing you no longer fall asleep. It's not knowing whether you've been running for days or weeks or years. It's when the sobbing slowly turns into laughter. He stood against my window. I don't know why I looked up, but when I did, I saw him there. He stood against my window. His forehead rested against the glass, and his eyes were still in light, and he smiled a red lipstick cartoonish grin. And he just stood there in the window. My wife was upstairs sleeping. My son was in the crib, and I couldn't move. I froze and watched him looking past me through the glass. Oh, please no. His smile never moved, but he put a hand up and slid it down the glass, watching me. With matted hair and yellow skin and face through the window, I couldn't do anything. I just stayed there, frozen, feet still in the bushes. I was pruning, looking into my home. He stood against my window. Before we begin, I'd like to give a big thank you to Somber Reads for collaborating with the Nightmare Lab on this week's episode. I urge all of my listeners to click the link in the description and subscribe to his channel. And while you're there, check out the episode that we collaborated on for his channel. My priest did something bad when I was a teen. It's not what you think.
I remember the days when I truly believed that All I needed to do was say 3 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers, and suddenly, all of my sins were forgiven. It was liberating, really. Now, it's comical. Before I continue, please don't take this as an anti-religion ramble on about how my parents were too strict and how Sunday school was too boring for my 16-year-old mind. This is something more intense. My father was a religious man, if you couldn't tell by the intro. He, my mother, my 2 brothers and I would go to church every Sunday. My brothers were twins, both 18 years old and were attached to my parents' hip. Me, I was the loner. I was more interested in pursuing life outside of the church, but the rest of my family devoted their entire existence to a higher being. After Mass, they would gather in the basement of the church with other members to discuss the upcoming week's activities and what message they wanted to focus on, or at least that's what I had assumed. The only thing that kept me somewhat interested in going to church was our priest, Father Morris. Father Morris was a fair, kind, and knowledgeable man about far more things than just religion. He would tell me stories of hikes he would go on as a kid with his dog Skipper, stories about girls he had fallen in love with before becoming a priest, stories about going to Phillies games with his dad. He was a human being. One time, after church, Father Morris asked me to come to his office with him to discuss the weekend's cookout our church had held annually. This was the party of the year for our little town of Stanley, Idaho. Everyone in the town, which happened to be almost every one of our church members, got together for an afternoon of music, food, dancing, and most importantly, the love and preaching of the name of God. Father Morris led the charge at the podium with organizing different games and activities. He even hopped over to the grill for a couple of hours. Again, he was a kind and fair man. He deserved better. This cookout was different. For the first few hours, it was just a gut feeling. I could not quite put my fingers on it, and then it hit me. Keep in mind, Stanley, Idaho at most had 90 people in it at the time, and not one person in the town was missing this cookout. Everyone knew each other by first and last name, where they lived and what color their tile was on the kitchen counters. Why do I mention this, you may ask? Because when you know your circle, outsiders are very easy to point out, no matter how well they tried to blend in. I couldn't help but realize that there were about half a dozen people at the cookout that I couldn't recognize. They were emotionless and hardly spoke to anyone. As I was sitting at one of the benches, however, I noticed that they suddenly became social butterflies with one group of people, my family. Naturally, curiosity got the best of me, and I ventured over to my family and what seemed like their old friends. The group of men immediately dispersed as I approached.
Hey, son, enjoying yourself?
Who were those men, Dad?
Who are you talking about, son? It's just us Howards hanging out.
I could tell something was off, but I didn't think it was worth pressing. So I just walked into the church for some shade. I entered the church, which was a parish with 12 pews on each side. It was built in 1894 and we have never added air conditioning. Tough sledding in the dead of August. But anything was better than the beating sun at the moment. I walked maybe 4 total steps until I heard a voice in the distance, mumbling what had seemed to be a prayer. It was Father Morris. From the side of things, you would think Father Morris had committed a deadly sin, begging and pleading for the forgiveness of his Lord and Savior, with beads of sweat pouring down his face. Father Morris must have heard my footsteps and whipped his head around to meet his bloodshot eyes with mine. He was frightened.
My child, you must forgive me. I did not intend for you to see me like this.
Father, is something wrong?
No, my child. Just a bit under the weather is all.
Is it about those men, Father?
Michael, I loved you since you were a boy. I was at the hospital when your mother gave birth to you, and I can only do so much to protect you. One day I will not be here. You must give yourself over to Christ. Only He can save you now.
He paused, seemingly defeated knowing my assumption had been correct. He wiped his face of sweat and choked back a tear. And then, in no more than 15 seconds, He was outside at the cookout once more with a smile on his face, looking like the priest I had grown in admiration for. It was difficult for me to wrap my head around what had just transpired. Was I to be concerned? Maybe it was just the heat getting to Father Morris's head. Whatever the case, I knew better than to pry and ask questions. Rabbit holes were deep and dark in this town, and you certainly didn't want to be caught digging in one. The following week is when some of the questions I never asked for were answered. My father, who would always lead Bible study, had suddenly stopped asking me to join the rest of the family, or would find an excuse to send me out of the house while they would do it. Don't get me wrong, I was ecstatic. I was able to get away from what I had viewed as the most tedious and mundane activity on the planet. This was heaven for a teenager. Then, I became chilled to my core. I came home from school on Thursday to find that every single one of our Bibles had been in the fire pit, burning to ash in our backyard. Instinctively, I sprinted inside to alert my father of what I had thought he would deem sacrilege.
Oh, my dear boy, we have new Bibles coming in. Those were sin.
My knees buckled. I couldn't believe what I had just heard my father say, and his toothy grin. That smile burned into my mind. Okay, Dad.
Run along, Michael.
As he still maintained the same toothy grin, I went up to my room, which was at the very end of the hallway on the second floor. To get there, I had to pass both my brother's and parents' room. The twins shared a room, by choice, as there was a spare bedroom that was never used. For some reason, I could never remember going into that spare bedroom, nor anyone else really. Anyway, as I continued walking toward my room, my parents' bedroom door was open, with my mother sitting in her chair looking out to the yard, observing the burning Bibles. She had her back to me.
Michael.
Fighting back tears with fear of being in trouble, I responded, "Yes, Mother?" She slowly turned her head toward me, boasting the same toothy grin that Father had on his face.
You know that a mother always knows best, right?
"Yes, Mother."
Do you? I hope for your sake you do. Remember, Mother is always watching.
Can I go to my room now, Mother?
Run along, Michael.
As she maintained the same toothy grin, I didn't leave my room for the remainder of the night. Not for food, not for water, not for the bathroom. Nothing. I felt as if I was frozen. Despite the copious amounts of sweat that littered the back of my neck, I was 16 and afraid. I had to come up with something to get myself out of this situation. It certainly didn't help that I noticed the same group of men at the cookout, coming by to collect the ashes of the Bibles my father had burned in the backyard, and left a small box in its place. The next morning, I woke up to my bedroom door wide open. Terrified, I got out of bed without saying a word. Needless to say, school was not an option for me today. After a few minutes of inspection, I came to find my house was empty. Something in my gut had told me that the spare bedroom could very well have been the answer to one of my questions. Remember when I told you that Stanley, Idaho was a place you did not want to go down rabbit holes? Every time I walked by that room as a child, I would shimmy the doorknob just to see if it was ever unlocked. It wasn't. However, this time, it was. I regret ever opening that door. The room reeked of dried blood and dead carcasses. The middle of the room had a pentagram which was made of what seemed to be ash. There was an altar in the back of the room, with the severed head of a goat poached on the wall behind the podium. I checked the closet, which contained black hooded cloaks. On the floor was a box which looked identical to the one the group of men had left in the backyard. I opened the box, which contained several copies of the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. I had enough. I sprinted downstairs and out of my house. There was only one place that I felt safe, and that was at Father Morris's house. Reaching his doorstep, I started to feverishly bang on his door while waiting for him to answer. I couldn't help but notice that the air was filled with the smell of burning paper. The same smell in our backyard yesterday. What were his neighbors possibly burning? Father Morris flung the door open and got me in the house.
What is it, Michael?
Father, my parents, the room, they, I exclaimed, choking back tears.
Michael, slow down.
No, Father, you know what this is about, don't you? The men at the cookout, your episode at the church. Is this the part where you're going to tell me that only Christ can save me now? I could see in his eyes that he knew, but I just couldn't get it out of him.
Michael, you must listen. Your family has converted. They no longer see Christ as their savior. They've given themselves to another higher being.
You know about this?
Yes, my child. They strong-armed me. I had no choice. I had to protect you. I had to protect everyone, even if it meant giving in to sin.
We can go, Father. We can skip town.
Michael, you must face this. The basement meetings at the church, you've always known that's where your path would become split, and where you must choose to stay on the path of righteousness. I'll be right there by your side.
Father Morris and I made our way out of the house and started our trek to the church. As we walked down the streets, the residents of Stanley began to open their doors, but didn't exit their houses. Instead, they stared. One thing they all had in common, the same toothy grin as my parents. They just kept staring. We finally reached the door at the end of the church after what felt like hours. I put my hand on the knob, which was ice cold, and flung open the door. While nothing was out of place, and there were no pentagrams or goat heads, the energy of the church was simply black. It was pure abyss and nothingness. Passing each pew gave an ominous and empty feeling with every step, until we reached the basement door. Like I said, I had never been in the basement before. I had no expectations. Father Morris, however, was terrified. He knew something I didn't. There were only roughly a dozen steps to reach the bottom of the basement, which was dimly lit by candlelight. Reaching the bottom of the steps, Father Morris and I were greeted by a scene of pure terror, similar to that of my spare bedroom. This time, the pentagram was thrice the size and its medium was blood. However, the basement's podium shared a similar face at the helm, my father. Surrounding him was my mother, my two brothers and the group of men from the cookout, all sporting the black hooded cloaks I saw in the closet.
Hello, Michael. Father Morris,
he said in the same guttural voice as my mother.
We've been expecting you. Come, share with us in the birth of our new Lord and Savior.
Father Morris slowly put his arm in front of my chest, pushing me behind him so as to protect me.
Michael,
he whispered to me, looking behind his back.
Whatever you do, don't.
And before he could finish his sentence, he was quickly snatched by four of the men, quickly taken to the middle of the pentagram. My brothers then brought out a crucifix and laid Father Morris out like he was Christ himself. They didn't even bother to restrain me, which was odd. I guess they knew that I was frozen from the toothy grin they all displayed. This was when the hammering began. The screams from Father Morris were deafening. I could hear his bones crunch and his blood spew with every swing of the hammer. I broke down to my knees and tears began to flow. None of them broke their smile. After what felt like hours of agonizing hell, they finally finished with Father Morris's crucifixion. To my surprise, he was still conscious. Then, they flipped the cross upside down, letting the blood from the holes in his shin flood his naked body. That's when the chants began, and whatever ritualistic hymns they were chanting, this was the cue from my mother. Toothy grin maintained, to bring the torch to Father Morris. Have you ever smelled burning flesh? Coupled with the screams, instinct forcibly took over. I took off to run. At first, I tripped on some debris, which compelled me to look back one last time. I regret looking back, as I saw Father Morris through the flames, carrying the same grin as the rest of them. Then, he said it.
Run along, Michael.
That was 10 years ago. I was able to sprint out of town and hitch a ride to Boise. I was luckily adopted into a loving family after I had told the foster care my story. Now, I am 26 and a priest at my church. I have a darling wife who just gave birth to our third child. We had twin boys 3 years ago. At the comfort of my office, I am able to finally say Father Morris was right. He wasn't able to protect me forever, but now, my Savior can.
Father Michael, your new Bibles have arrived.
Thank you very much, my child. Run along, Timmy.
I should have read the reviews. My girlfriend moved out 3 weeks ago. My cat Rook was really close to her, and now that she's gone, I can tell he's a bit lonely, especially when I'm at work. I came home a few times to my curtains ripped up, or all the toilet paper in shreds. The last straw is when I came home after working late to find that he had clawed a hole the size of a dinner plate into the side of the sofa. I decided I had to do something. I tried different toys, even catnip, but nothing worked. One night while browsing Amazon, I saw a pet camera. It's a tiny camera that records your pet on a live feed so you can monitor their behavior while you're away. It even has audio functions, so I could talk to him. Sounded silly, but hey, I love my furry dudes, so I bought it. I got overnight shipping and installed it immediately. I decided to set it up in my bedroom, as that's where Rook dwelled the most. My first day at work, I think I checked the camera 30 times. When I spoke into the microphone, Rook seemed to be happier, and I noticed that there was no destruction around the house either. By day 4, I figured I'd solved the problem with Rook. That leads me to right now. About 30 minutes ago, I climbed into bed with Rook, ready to close my eyes, when my phone buzzed. A notification from the pet cam. I almost ignored it, sure that I'd triggered the thing, but I opened it anyways. What I saw made my grip tighten on the phone. Instead of a video of myself in bed, I saw a man, tall, gangly, with pale skin, large eyes. He was moving into my room with exaggerated steps, like a sneaking cartoon character. He got right up to the lens, so close I can almost smell his rotten breath, and he smiled. I immediately paused the video, terrified. I looked at the spot where the man should have been standing, but there was no one there. I went onto Amazon and found the pet cam. I read the reviews, hoping for some weird glitch. It had to be a joke, right? The first dozen reviews were pretty standard, but it was the last one that caused me to bolt upright. A customer complained that the camera was on a time delay, sometimes as much as 15 minutes. I went back to the video and pressed play with shaky fingers. I watched in horror as the man slithered under my bed, giving the camera a wink before disappearing into the darkness. Then I saw myself enter the room and climb into bed before the video ended. Now I'm sitting in bed, knowing he's under it. I could call the police, but I doubt I'd have time, so please, do yourself a favor and read the reviews. I'm no angel. It's 3:17 in the morning, and I leap out of the bunk as soon as the tone rings. To an outsider, they might just sound like a series of beeps, like a more elaborate form of Morse code, but to me, and to folks like me, it sounds as clear as if they were announced over a loudspeaker. 2 short beeps, 1 long, 2 fast. This is what it sounds like when the EMS Rig 6 is brought into service. My shoes are on my feet before the tone even stops, and I'm out of the door prepared in under half a minute. We don't need to inspect the rig to make sure that we're ready. We do it at the beginning and the end of every shift. Lord forbid you arrive on scene and find yourself without oxygen or airways. I'm in the passenger seat, a full 15 seconds before my partner, Jonathan Torres, a man who always looks better than he is. You have to give the man credit. It's admirable how he can hide himself behind $100 sunglasses and hair gel. We're pulling out of the base as dispatch comes over the radio. It's a trauma case, and it sounds severe. A woman in her early 20s, signs of head trauma, likely altered mental status. This was a major league deal. Most people think EMTs ride around in an ambulance all day, like some sort of angel in a blue coat. I'm no angel, just a guy with a job. The fact is, most of what we do is just drive elderly people between hospitals and long-term care facilities. We're a taxi for the fucking geriatric, by and large. We're on scene long before ALS, and there's a black and white there to greet us. Tourists must know the guy, since they give each other a friendly nod and a quick informal greeting. The officer tells us that they were called to the scene for a bleeding, incoherent woman. They suspect drug use. I glance over, my hand tightening on the green bag in my palm. It weighs maybe 40 pounds, and it has everything in it that you could ever hope to need in case of an emergency, most of which goes unused for practically everything. We approach the woman, and I'm a little taken back. She's beautiful, even with the dried, caked blood holding her blonde hair to her forehead. I feel empathy, something as an EMT I'm usually completely desensitized to. She's younger than the reports, maybe 16, if that, and she's very apparently nude beneath the fire blanket the officer must have draped around her shoulders. She clings to it. For the briefest of moments, I'm jealous of that piece of flame-retardant wool. All she says is that he almost got her, and that she's terrified and needs to go. We try to assure her that she's safe, and we'll get her going in just a moment. A focused examination of her head reveals discoloration behind her ears, often common with sudden, swift, blunt force trauma. Her eyes are banded like a superhero's domino mask, not unlike a raccoon. I'm a little amazed that she doesn't have brains leaking out of her skull at this point. It's a fucking miracle that she's not dead, much less walking and talking. ALS arrives shortly after and label her as an unstable patient due to her altered mental status, more than the bashed-in head, admittedly. And they decide to transport her to St. Francis, the closest trauma center with any kind of cranial specialization. And just like that, the miracle woman, the beautiful, nubile girl with a mysterious past, is out of my life as soon as she stumbled in. Now, I'd like to tell you that I let sleeping dogs lie, but I just couldn't. This girl stayed in my brain, infecting me, affecting me. I lay down my head, and I dream of her. I answer calls, and I hope they're her. I let this go on for a week and a half, until I can't keep up anymore. As I go to load a patient, I drop my end of the stretcher. Torres yells at me. I don't hear a thing. That night, I drive to St. Francis. It's 5:30 in the morning when I arrive, entering through the emergency admittance entrance. The code for the door is star 911, as unimaginative as it is. I work my way past the nurses and the doctors I know well, citing a need to pick up a billing form I had forgotten. They all nod and give me a knowing smile. These things happen. Accidents happen. I found her room easily enough, somewhat drawn to it. She's not in the ICU anymore, just resting in a bed. She looks so bored, so tired of this hospital. I can relate, I tell her. Sometimes I wish I could just get away. I ask her if she wants to leave, and of course she does, but she's afraid her parents will be upset with her. I tell her they never have to know. She smiles. Today, I am a hero. I wheel her out in a stretcher and make sure to time it as soon as the morning change nurse is away from her station. Dahlia, as I learned her name, pretends to be asleep and motionless. She's so smart, too. Once we're in the elevator, we're in the clear. People just assume I'm transferring her. It's funny how easy you trust a man in a convincing uniform. Briefly, I'm terrified to think of what I could get away with if I had a fake badge. We're to my house before long, and Dahlia sleeps the entire way in the car. I understand. It gets so exhausting in the hospital. How is a person supposed to rest with all those people constantly shuffling in and out? All the pills that they give you for your own good? What a joke. I carry her across my doorstep like a bride. She's awake now, and she thinks it's adorable. She's practically screaming with happiness at this point. And I'm once again glad I live in such a remote area. It's a half-mile of forest and interstate between myself and the city itself, so the privacy is always abundant. Faintly, we can hear voices below us in the basement. I sigh softly, reminding myself to make sure I turn off the television before I leave the rec room. I carry her to the family room below, and the voices greet us much more urgently this time. I remind Dahlia not to be so forgetful as me, and that she should always remember to turn off the TV before leaving the house. I apologize for not setting a better impression. We walk down a long hallway, lined with doors on each side, until we come to the end with a more ornate door than the others. There's a small circular window in it, similar to a porthole, and you can see her beautiful room. There's a shelf with beautiful dolls for her and a wardrobe full of clothes. I tell her it's all for her, and that I'll never let anyone hurt her again. I lay her in her bed, and she rolls over, crying with happiness once more. It must feel good to be this loved. I leave her room, quietly locking it behind me so as I may not disturb her. She'll be safe here. As I walk back to the family room, the screaming finally comes to me from behind the doors. Faces of the other brides stare back at me, faces twisted with jealousy and envy. They know how much I love Dahlia, and they're ungrateful for all that I've given them. I shake my head slowly. They'll have to be punished for such impudence. A better man might be more understanding, but after all, I'm no angel. Life of a traitor. You know, it's really funny. In a maximum security prison filled with murderers and rapists, the worst thing it can do to you is leave you completely alone. Solitary confinement. The human brain needs input, or it quickly descends into horrifying madness of its own company. In 2086, when the world government fell into a dictatorship, capital punishment became very common. However, it was solitary confinement that people feared. That was reserved just for treason. I spent my life making these solitary confinement cells and carrying out the confinement. Here's how it works. The cells are molded to exactly fit the condemned. They're human-shaped coffins, arms out to the side 30 degrees, legs 45 degrees apart. For the insertion process, the traitors are sedated. The eyes, ears, and mouth are not damaged, but are all sealed permanently shut. An automated breathing tube inserted through the throat, and 3 IV lines are inserted to feed nutrients. We use 3 lines in case of a mechanical failure on one, and catheters are inserted to handle waste. The condemned are sealed in and buried in the very public traitors' graveyard, with enough autonomous supplies to last 80 years, but to be considered dead from that day. It's nasty, right? Well, that's been my job for the last 20 years, and I'm pretty numb to the idea of it. 1 person a day enters the traitors' graveyard. This was so that the condemned person's story could be featured on the evening news, along with their frenzied begging for a pardon. It hasn't caused me distress in many years. That was until last week, when I was convicted of treason. I can't really argue, I'm guilty, but after seeing the things that I have seen, is it surprising that I turned to murder? This regime needs to be brought down. This barbaric practice of solitary confinement needs to end now, but it will take a better man than me to achieve that. Today I woke up from sedation. My eyes and mouth sealed shut, Deafening silence and dazzling blackness greet my panic brain. Fight or flight response kicks in and I choose between 0 options. I can't move an inch. Even my fingers are molded in place. I just keep thinking about all those people I put down here, and all those things I wish I had done differently. I couldn't have been down here for more than a week, and I would choose death if I could. I would give anything to take back the treason I committed, the 7,000 people I killed. I only did it to save others from the untold suffering. I did it while they were sedated, a syringe of air into their veins to cause cardiac arrest. 1 murder each day for 20 years. It's just me alive down here, living the life of a traitor. Breaking Amy. Freddy wasn't your typical 13-year-old. He was an asshole. If he wasn't in his bedroom screaming at video games, he was scaring his 7-year-old sister. Every traumatizing prank that he pulled on little Amy would be worse than the last. Once he had even told her that their mother had been murdered, and he covered the entire kitchen floor with ketchup for maximum effect. He was the reason she was so unstable. She would often tell her mother that she heard whispers and had even seen ghosts wandering the house at night. Freddy would giggle at that, almost proud of the damage she had done. But unfortunately for Amy, it was never enough for him. He felt compelled to break her completely. The storm had kept Freddy awake that night. Restlessly, he tossed and turned in boredom. For a while, he tried to count sheep, but even that didn't help. In defeat, he laid mindlessly watching the raindrops slide down his window. Lightning flashed suddenly, illuminating his entire room. It was soon followed by a deafening boom. Freddy smiled. He knew what was then to come. Freddy heard his sister crying through the wall, closely followed by a faint pitter-patter as she ran to the mother's bedroom. This was it, his moment of fun. He crept down the hallway and into Amy's bedroom. He prowled around her room like a serial killer, studying every inch of it. Countless ideas rushed through his mind. Then he saw the closet. Freddy waited in the dark for what seemed like forever, peering through a small gap between the closet doors. He had decided that when his sister had returned and settled into bed, that he would begin to whisper. Then, when she was completely terrified, he would burst out and run at her, screaming at the top of his lungs. He had almost lost all hope and was about to leave when he heard the footsteps approaching. His mother opened the bedroom door and Amy slowly shuffled in. She was sucking her thumb and dragging her favorite blanket behind her. As she crawled into bed, Freddy couldn't help but to grin in excitement. Freddy watched in silence as their mother tucked Amy tightly into bed and planted a big kiss on her forehead, and finally said goodnight. He waited anxiously until he heard his mother's door close before beginning. That's it, he thought, shaking in delirium, the moment I break her. Amy, Freddy whispered hauntingly. She didn't respond. Amy, he continued. Still no response. I'm in the closet, Amy. Come play with me, he harshly croaked.
Not tonight, Lucy,
Amy calmly replied. Freddy frowned in confusion. She must be sleep-talking, he thought. Wake up, Amy. It's not... A hand reached out from behind him, and it pulled Freddy back into the darkness and clutched over his mouth with a cold, tight grip.
She said not tonight.
Opposed forces. It all started with the pool. One moment, New York was full of people hurrying to work and talking on their cell phones. And the next, all of the noise stopped. The streets were empty and everyone had just vanished into thin air. Without anyone to pilot them, airplanes fell from the sky. Cars and trains and buses crashed. Fires started in the buildings and parks, and with the fire department unavailable and the nation in absolute confusion, they continued to burn through most of New York City. It'd take days to put them out. Of course, after that was taken care of, questions were asked. The government would launch an investigation into the event and attempt into finding the 19.49 million victims. Nothing ever became of it, though. The pool left no bodies, no evidence. Families mourned and speculation ran rampant on the news. Conspiracy theories were passed around, but eventually, the world started to move on. Then, the push, an opposing force, or maybe a complementary one. Doesn't really matter what it was. Body parts appeared out of nowhere. Heads were found throughout the Oregon wilderness, impaled in tree limbs and floating down streams. Toes and fingers were expelled through hollowed-out trunks and holes. Flowers bloomed, opening up to reveal human eyes. Questions were asked, sure, but nobody had any answers. MentalHealthFriend. MentalHealthFriend is your all-in-one mental health app. It's free for basic, $250 for premium, 4.8 stars, over 1 million downloads. Alright.
Do you accept the terms and conditions?
I guess.
MentalHealthFriend would like to access your contacts, location, NFC, messaging, camera, microphone, Samsung Galaxy Watch, Google Play services.
Alright.
If you are currently taking any medications, please enter them into the app. It's time to take venlafaxine 225 milligrams. Tip: fresh air and exercise are important. Go for a walk on your lunch break. Tip: try to avoid looking at screens for an hour before bed. See how you did this week. You took venlafaxine 225 milligrams on time 71% of days this week. Well done. Did you self-harm at any point today?
No.
See how you did this week. You didn't self-harm this week. Well done.
Yay.
From your location data, it appears you're working late. Tip: overwork is a common cause of stress.
Yeah, no shit.
Tip: red wine contains antioxidants and relieves stress. Treat yourself, you've earned it. Did you self-harm at any point today?
Yeah.
See how you did this week. You self-harmed twice this week. Tip: cutting down the length of your wrist increases your risk of bleeding out. From your location data, you are in a liquor store. Tip: drinking 700 milliliters of spirits may cause potentially fatal alcohol poisoning.
Let's hope so.
Tip: work to live, not live to work. If you need a self-care day, don't be afraid to call in sick.
Yeah, that would be nice. But I need money.
Tip: work to live, not live to work. If you need a self-care day, don't be afraid to call in sick.
Alright, fuck it then. I guess I'm not going to work.
From your location data, you have not been to work for 3 weeks. Have you been let go?
Sure have.
Tip: unemployment is a major cause of stress and depression.
It's your fucking idea.
From your location data, you are on a bridge. A fall from this height will likely be fatal. You have just sent a text to Adam, dealer. Note that 30 milligrams of pure heroin will likely cause fatal cardiac arrest.
We'll see.
You have received several texts from Mom. Tell her everything's fine and you've just been busy with work?
Yeah.
The 6th of June 2019, 11:41 p.m. According to Samsung Galaxy Watch, your heart rate is approaching 0 BPM. As stated in the terms and conditions, the app will now automatically purchase the premium version and post a 5-star review, then uninstall. Thank you for using MentalHealthFriend.
Hidden. Where are you? I screamed. Panicked, I run through the abandoned farm. I cannot find her. Not in the old house, not in the barn. I run into an empty field, heart racing. As I scan the area, I run into a mound of dirt and trip, sprawling to the ground. Getting up, it hits me. The abandoned farm. I tripped over freshly tilled earth. Crouching down, I start frantically clawing with my hands, scooping handfuls of dirt. I hit something hard. Wood. Are you in there? I cry, pressing my ear to the wood. I hear muffled cries. I start digging again, but realize it's taking too long. Looking around, I see a garden shed. I sprint to it, ripping open the door. I see a shovel, still caked in dirt. Probably the same one the bastard buried her with. I grab it, and running back, I start digging with a purpose. Soon the wooden box is exposed. I toss the shovel and rip open the crate. She stares back at me, wide-eyed, bound and gagged, but still alive. I sigh with relief. Thank God. I reached into my bag, pulling out my rag and chloroform. I crouch down, placing it over her face. She struggles, but faints. I toss her over my shoulder.
All hell. You found her,
my brother says as I walk back to the truck with a smirk. Yep, you almost had me though, I laughed.
All right, my turn. Where'd you put her?
I gesture to the creek area. Somewhere over there. Drowning's an issue though.
Jerk,
he says, running off. I smile watching him go. I love playing hide and seek with my brother. My favorite support group. Look, I'll be the first to admit it, I'm a complete bastard. I'm also lazy. I'm only here to find the idiot, because there's almost always an idiot. This support group is pretty typical. We connected online, decided on a quiet place, and now we're sitting cross-legged in a circle. Real kumbaya crap. Jerome takes the lead, pouring everyone a cup of tea as he starts talking. I'm Jerome. You can drink your tea, but only after explaining why you're here. I'll start. Jerome tells us he'd never been loved. I can see why. The guy's ugly as sin. He sips his tea while the mousy chick speaks next. Miyu, she says. My parents. Short and sweet, no blubbering. Gotta admire Miyu. She's probably not the idiot. Next to talk are the legless veteran, a broke businessman, a needle-tracked junkie, and a diseased old crone. Then it's my turn. I'm an ass. Everyone hates me. I take a loud, annoying slurp of tea as the fat kid with the black eye goes next, telling his boring fat kid sob story. Afterwards, we're all sitting quietly while Jerome keels over. Then Miyu's eyes roll back as she slumps forward. Only the fat kid reacts. What's happening? He whines. I thought this was a suicide support group. Found the idiot. It is, I say, spitting out my mouthful of tea. They support it. No one wants to die alone, kid. Oh, how ghost white he turns, looking at his cup. I love it. These suicide meetups are a sadist dream, and I never have to lift a finger. I told you I'm a lazy bastard. nap in the car. Mommy always leaves me and Daddy at home on Saturday nights, and me and Daddy always go get ice cream in the car after dinner. I have to sit in the back seat until I'm a big boy. I go to the kitchen to see what Daddy is cooking for dinner after my Barney movie is over, but he's not in the kitchen this time. I saw a note on the counter that said Mommy and Uncle James were going somewhere together. I'm not sure. I don't read that good. I go find Daddy in the garage. I shut the door behind me like I'm supposed to. Daddy's in the car, and he already has the car turned on. We must not be eating dinner tonight, only ice cream. I get in the back seat behind Daddy since I'm not a big boy yet. Daddy doesn't even say anything when I say hello to him. Maybe he can't hear me over the loud car. I think I'll take a nap on the way to get ice cream. I feel kind of sleepy. So, I lost my phone. Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch an opening act at the local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table where we were sitting at, the bar, the restrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered. They gave out 2 low, raspy giggles. They didn't answer it again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. I found my cell phone lying on my nightstand, right where I left it. The happiest day of my life. I watched as my soon-to-be father-in-law held his daughter's hand as he walked down the aisle. Tears streamed down his face as the wedding march that played in the background reminded him that, in a few minutes, he would be watching me take a hold of his daughter's hand and slipping on her ring. He walked up to the altar and I took a hold of her hand, grinning from ear to ear. It was the happiest day of my life. My bride's father got down on his knees and started to beg, "Please, I did what you asked. Just please give me back my daughter." I glared at him. "Shut up and stop ruining the moment. If you sit back down and enjoy the ceremony, maybe I'll tell you where I've hidden the rest of her body." My family. I died 8 years ago. It wasn't particularly tragic or unusual, just a car accident. I don't blame the man who hit me. He was speeding because his wife was in labor and there was black ice on the road. He lost control of the car and I lost my life. It's not his fault, and I know that. I'm not cruel and I'm not vengeful. If anything, I'm the opposite. You see, I don't have any family left, and I had lost the few friends I had around that time. When it was time for my funeral, the only people who came were my boss and the family who killed me. The wife held her newborn daughter close to her chest. I hated my boss, and the cemetery was awfully lonely, so I followed the family home. Lily may as well been my own flesh and blood. She was sweet and bright and oh so very small. She had trouble sleeping if someone wasn't rocking her crib, and her parents were so tired after they put her to bed. It was easy for me to rock the crib for her. I didn't get tired. I could help her. As the years passed, Jack and Lloiu realized that they weren't alone in the home. It didn't take long for them to make the connection between my funeral and when I had showed up. And I had never been malevolent, so they weren't angry or afraid. They started to burn candles on the anniversary of my death day. They left an empty chair for meals and holidays. I really felt like a member of the family, you know. Someone's trying to force the door. It's Lori's ex. He's obsessive. He's angry. He's going to hurt the family. My family. The thing about ghosts is, the more offerings you get, the stronger you become. I'd been enjoying candles, trinkets, and even the occasional food item for the past 5 years. I was strong from that. The knife feels warm in my hand, a shock of heat against the ice of my skin. Lori, Jack, and Lily are my family, and I care about them. They're not going to join me yet. I keep my son inside a chest. Each morning when I wake up, I open the chest where I keep my son. I stroke his small skull and murmur, "Good morning," although I know he can no longer hear me. I hope he doesn't think I've abandoned him. I hope he knows I never will. When my son died of a fever, I refused to let him go. He was only a baby, and all that I had left. So I turned to the stories my own mother had told me, the rituals and legends I'd learned in childhood. The rules of bringing someone back from the underworld seemed so easy. I scoffed at the stories of those who failed, sure that my willpower would be stronger than theirs. I forced my way through the fields of night, and I found my son's faint, pale soul. I guided it all the way back to his body, never looking back once. When I saw my son open his eyes again and smile at me, I thought I had made the right choice. He laughed, he ran, he played just as he did before. I even believed I could pretend nothing had happened. Then, a few days later, I saw the rot creeping up his skin. At that moment, I realized my mistake. I hadn't restored my son to life. I had only brought his soul back to his corpse. I tried to comfort him as his body swelled and decayed, and he wailed day and night in fear as his flesh fell from his bones. Only when his throat rotted away did he stop screaming. I attempted to return to the underworld, to return my son's soul, but the way would not open to me again. I cheated death, and my punishment was to keep what I stole. When his ligaments finally broke down, I gathered his bones and placed them in an antique chest that I inherited from my mother. Only the best would do for my son. Sometimes my son's bones lie still in the chest for hours, even days, and I dare to hope that his soul found its way back to where it belongs. But sooner or later, his bones always begin to rattle again, and I know he's still alive. Once, all I wanted was to have my son here with me, but now, I would give anything for him to die. "24 hours. Yesterday, Todd made it his mission to sleep with as many women as possible. He managed a whopping 37 in just 24 hours, an insurmountable amount for an average day, but this is not an average day. Who was going to say no to some sex? He didn't know he'd soon be the father to 6 illegitimate children, or he wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, Anne snapped and slit the throat of her toxic ex-husband. The neighbors were walking by and saw the whole thing through the window, but simply looked at each other, shrugged, and kept walking. Anne continued her day as usual, leaving the still, warm body on the floor. She didn't know she'd be arrested for murder, or she wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, Lacey took her husband and kids on a drive on the winding roads next to the ocean. Her hands shook as she gripped the wheel, while her kids sat oblivious in the back. She and her husband shared a meaningful look as she jerked the car to the right and into the crashing ocean waves. She didn't know she'd be shunned while laying 6 feet under, or she wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, the news was announced that an unsurvivable asteroid was headed straight to Earth. Yesterday, the world erupted into unprecedented chaos as everyone had to decide what to do with their last 24 hours. But today, utter and complete pandemonium occurred, because the asteroid missed. I did not kill a man when I was 8 years old. My stepfather hated everything my mother loved. Not just me or her hobbies, and hell, probably himself too, but everything that made her happy. But Apollo, he hated more than anything. I was 5 when me and my mom got Apollo, a skinny, skittish puppy at the time. He was patient with me. Toddlers aren't always nice, but he worshipped Mom. The little I remember of the time was happiness. I was 7 when the man moved in. He didn't tolerate happiness in the home. He kicked Apollo for being too loud and soon kicked me as well. After almost losing a finger, he learned not to hit us when Apollo was there. If he had known that I noticed that he feared dogs, he would have beat me for noticing. He hated weakness, and it was always someone else's fault if he didn't like how he was feeling. After a while, he started ordering me to herd Apollo into another room and close the door when he wanted to beat me or my mom. Apollo would bark, howl, and claw at the door when it happened, and the neighbors called animal protection 3 times but never called the police. Some dogs can open doors. Apollo wasn't one of them. I did not kill a man when I was 8 years old. All I did was open a door. $6,500 languages. I should have wished to be rich, but felt it was too self-serving. I should have wished for fame, but felt I'd lose privacy. I should have wished for world peace, but felt one's country peace could be another country's poverty. I cursed the day I met the Wishmaster, and even more so for the perfect wish I thought I'd come up with. I'd like to become a master of language. The Wishmaster hesitated and asked,
"Of every language?"
I nodded. The wish was educational in nature, so it couldn't have been purely vanity pushing me to become an expert linguist. The wish could not possibly affect anyone adversely, for it truly only affected me. The sole purpose of the wish was to further communication and perhaps close the global gap just a bit by having someone act as a language liaison.
How long does it take for someone to become a master at something?
Confused, I responded with, I guess, 10,000 hours of deliberate, focused practice is the rumor. The Wishmaster went silent. Then,
10,000 hours of deliberate, focused practice? And you'd be a master at language?
I suppose so.
But that's only considering one language at 10,000 hours, right?
I shrugged, but agreed. I was unsure where this was headed until I noticed the wind slowing to a stop. A stillness. The ambient white noise of the city was now deafening silence, and suddenly, I was whisked from being face to face with the Wishmaster and into my own study, armed with a pen, pad of paper, and an English dictionary with the doors shuddering locked. Again confused, I asked aloud to no one in particular, "What's going on? Why am I in my house, and why do I have a dictionary in front of me?" A disembodied voice responded,
"Well, this is to give you the deliberate, focused practice you need. I figure English will be the easiest since you already speak it."
I'm sorry. I don't understand. What's going on? I wanted to be a master of every language. What does this have to do with anything? The voice ignored.
From there, we can move language by language in alphabetical order. I hope you're looking forward to Africans after this first 10,000 hours.
And the Wishmaster's been silent ever since. I should have wished to be rich, for fame, for world peace. Instead, I'm frozen in time, studying until the Wishmaster deems me an expert. If the metric is 10,000 hours, that's a little over a year for each language. This may be fine. How many world languages can there really be? The Gray Lady. Have you guys ever heard of the Gray Lady? I remember hearing some campfire stories of her when I was a kid, but I haven't been able to find much information about her. Here's what I remember. Supposedly people see her in remote places, mountaintops, deep forests, out in the country. She appears to be an old, very tall, thin woman, and she wears a long gray dress. People report seeing her during times of great physical duress, usually when the witness believes himself to be close to death, and almost exclusively when the witness is alone in the situation. They say she always has this big smile. I found this story online a few years ago about a hiker who got lost in British Columbia and saw her. Everything is true here, but I kind of hope this isn't. I'd already been out there for about 4 days, doing some off-trail hiking, and I had a great time. I used to love going out to the woods by myself. I like the solitude. I must have gotten turned around. I didn't end up back where I wanted to be at what was supposed to be the end of my trip. I later found out that I had been going in the almost complete opposite direction of my car. It was about 3 days after I was supposed to be home. I was just trying to get out of there when I started to see things. Just on the edge of my vision, shadows. I'd look and there'd be nothing there. At night I would hear noises outside my tent. At first I thought it was just animals, and I'm sure some of the sounds were, but others... I heard scratching. And sometimes late at night I'd wake up to hearing breathing. Not like any animal. I'd call out thinking that maybe someone was there, but I'd never get an answer. This went on for a few days. I thought maybe it was just the woods getting to me. You hear horror stories about hunters who get lost and start hallucinating, or who die of thirst with water in their packs. The forest can mess with you, but about a week after I got lost, I saw her off in the distance, maybe 200 yards. Hands at her side, and she was tall, 6 or 7 feet, with her head craned downwards, like she was deformed or something. But she was still looking at me. She wore this dirty dress that hung down to the ground. I called out, but she still didn't do or say anything. I started running towards her. I was scared, but by then I was worried that I wasn't going to make it out of the woods. I got maybe 100 feet, but she stepped behind a tree, and when I got up there, I was just alone. I don't know where she could have gone. The next couple of days I didn't see anything, and the nights were quiet. I just kept following the creek, hoping to find something, anything. I ran out of food on the 10th day, and that night I woke up, not sure what time it was, to laughing outside. A low giggle. It lasted for a few seconds. Had I dreamed it? I opened the flap of my tent and called out, but all I could hear was the sound of running water, which was strange. There should have been bugs, deer, wind, something, but it was just so quiet. Then a loud snap from about 20 feet away. I shined my flashlight and I saw her there, half hidden, poking out from behind a tree, grinning at me. I got a better look at her than I did before. She was old. Her hair was done up in a bun, and her face was distorted. Her nose was too long and crooked, and her eyes were too close together, too big, black. We stared at each other for a long time, and when I called out to her, her grin just got wider. I just sat there, frozen, looking at her. I yelled again. I asked her what she wanted, and she just laughed. This scratchy, painful laugh. Then she stepped out of the light, and I couldn't find her again. The rest of the night I heard things outside. Even the constant bubbling of the creek scared me. I wanted out. I was hungry, exhausted, and scared for my life. I truly believed that I was going to die in these woods. At first light I set out, walking as fast as I could away from the campsite. Sometimes in the late afternoon I came across an old logging road. It didn't look like it had been used in years, and I knew that it didn't mean that I was safe yet, but still, seeing that sign of humanity, it was the happiest moment of my life. It was getting dark, and I felt like I was going to pass out, but I didn't want to stop. I don't think that I could have slept anyways. Somehow I found the energy to keep going. About 2 hours after I started following the road, it was pitch black out, and it started to rain. I'd been lucky enough to have good enough weather for my trip, but within a few minutes it was pouring. I was plodding along as fast as I could when I heard footsteps behind me. I'd stop and listen, and they would stop too. I'd start walking, and I'd hear them again. A few times I thought I could see her, stopped not too far behind me. And more than once I heard her laughing, that disgusting laugh. It was almost dawn when I came to the top of the hill and saw lights. Lights, mankind, civilization. I practically fell down the hill, stumbling to the door of a small house. I must have looked like some kind of monster, dirty, wet, and exhausted, but they took me in. It was an old couple. They gave me some food and a bed to sleep in. I woke up and they told me that I had slept for 15 hours. I told them about the woman I saw. As nice as they were, I could tell that I was making them uncomfortable. They told me it was just the hunger, but I know what I saw, out there, deep in the woods. And I'll never forget the laughing. Confession. You okay, buddy?
Yeah.
You sure? You're breathing heavy.
I'm okay.
Good. Relax. It'll go quicker that way. To start, I just need some basic information.
Basic?
Simple things.
Okay.
Let's start with an easy one. What's your name?
Roy.
Roy what?
From here.
Well, Mr. Fromere, how old are you?
16.
You go to school?
No.
Why not?
Dunno. Just don't.
You live alone?
No.
You live with your mother and your brother Bill, don't you?
Yeah.
Good. You're doing fine, but now I need to ask you some harder questions, okay? Can you handle that?
Yeah.
Good boy. Your brother Bill's in some hot water, isn't he? He's been accused of some bad things.
Accused?
He did something bad to that little girl, Jenny Connor.
Oh.
To be frank, Mr. Fromere, I think you might know something about that. That's why you're here today. I think you have a story about Bill and that little girl. Don't be shy. Relax, you aren't in any trouble. Just answer me one question. Did you see Bill and Jenny go into the woods?
I didn't see them.
Really?
I saw Jenny. Bill was home.
You say you saw Jenny go into the woods, but Bill was at home?
Yeah.
Mr. Fromere, I find that a wee bit hard to believe. You know, we found Bill's jacket in those woods. We found his jacket soaked in about a pint of blood, Jenny's blood. And we found her too. Funny enough, she was just a few yards away. We took some pictures. You want to see them?
Pictures?
Of the body. You want to see them?
No.
No, I expect you don't. They're not pretty. But nevertheless, they beg the question. What was Jenny's blood doing on Bill's jacket? And why do a dozen witnesses claim to have seen them leave together from the football game?
Witnesses?
Mr. Fromere, I know you followed them from the field. We have it on CCTV. So I ask you again, did you see Bill take Jenny into the woods? Did you?
I didn't.
I think you're lying.
Bill was home. We go together from football. Bill said, take Jenny home.
You took Jenny?
It was cold. Bill said, take Jenny and take my jacket. I said, let's go to the woods. Jenny said no, and it made me mad. I pushed her. She hurt her head.
What?
I hit her in the woods. I was scared. I didn't want trouble. She woke up. She was mad and screaming, so I hit her. I hit her so she shut up.
And the jacket?
Jacket.
Bill's jacket.
I hid it.
Where?
Under my bed?
Christ, no, not under your bed. Think, for once in your life, fucking think. You hid it in the woods.
And I hid it in the woods.
Yeah, don't forget, it's important.
Sorry.
When they ask for real, you have to remember. I'm sorry for yelling. I hate seeing you made a fool of is all.
I know, Bill.
Everyone has a number written on their arm. there has never been a 1. The numbering, as historians prefer to call it, happened 52 years ago, on July 7th, 2024, at 11:16 a.m. It wasn't really anything special. Suddenly, everyone in the world just looked down and saw a number. Quickly after, scientists figured out the numbers followed rules. 1. Each person, no matter what, had a different number, and the largest at the time was recorded at 7,574,299,371. 2. When someone died, their number would disappear and immediately reappear onto a newborn somewhere in the world. Children were always born with numbers. 3. A rare phenomenon that was observed is called a renumbering. When someone kills another, the murderer gains the number of the deceased. 4. The numbers are unremovable. Every method has been tried, including amputation. 5. There has never been a recorded person with the number 1. Since the numbers appeared, the world class order was rearranged. Soon, there was a literal 1%. The impoverished with low numbers became aristocrats overnight. Billionaires that got branded with a number above 100,000 were ostracized from their own society. The lower numbers took power in every country. The current man with the number 2 became the President of the United States at the age of 24. Discrimination ran rampant, renumberings among the higher numbers commonplace. The lower numbers never had to worry, they could afford the top-of-the-line security at all times. The only mystery that remained unsolved, besides why the numbering happened in the first place, was the apparent non-existence of the number 1. Each baby born since the numbering was checked to no avail. A cult called the Brotherhood of I, dedicated to the worship of the mythical number 1, grew, until the world was divided further into 2 categories: those who sought the number 1 as a god to protect or as a blessing to kill for the purpose of renumbering. Number 1 was a little girl named Sophia, born to my sister. As soon as she was born, the personnel in the room, all the Brotherhood members, kept us on lockdown for 2 months, not letting anyone in or out while they protected Sophia. But even steel boats leak, and she was discovered. I escaped with my niece at the insistence of my sister, who was still recovering from childbirth. I'm certain that she's dead now. We were living on our own in the sparsely populated regions of Oregon, but I was tired of having a living target on my back. Sophia was no blessing, she was a curse. The number 1 is a curse. But I couldn't kill her, I don't want her number. So I left her, alone, 2.5 months old, unable to sit up by herself. I hoped an animal would take care of her. I hoped it wouldn't count as my fault. I misplaced my hopes again, because the number 1 just appeared on my arm. Please, read every word. Don't turn around, seriously. He's right behind you. In fact, he's reading this very warning over your shoulder. The fact that you're still alive and reading is proof that my experiment has worked. It wasn't easy figuring out how to cast a protection spell over the sheer number of people that he's after right now. And since he can be just so many places at once, that's a lot of people. Keep reading. He's getting angry, but he can't touch you as long as your eyes are over here. Once you get to the end of this message, the spell will be complete, and you can do whatever you want after that. He won't even be able to show himself to you at that point, trust me. No one wants to see that anyways. All smiles with razor teeth, flaming eyes, needle claws, enough to drive anyone mad. He's been following you for a while now, by the way. Watching you sleep, savoring the coming moment when he would finally bleed you out. If you'd looked down at the foot of your bed a little more often, you might have seen the 3 red eyes hungrily sweeping over you when the darkness was at its deepest. The eyes are the only part most of us can see. The rest of him only shows up after you finally touched him. Ignore that itch. He's trying to distract you, and if you take your eyes off the screen again before you reach the end, you're done for. I worked for a long time trying to figure out how to distribute the spell. I finally managed to combine technology and magic in a way that I didn't think was possible. I designed a word processing app, and I can administer the spell at my disposal just by writing out a document. The more complex the spell, the longer the document needs to be, and the recipient must read the entire message. Otherwise, the spell will only work while you keep your eyes on this message. You're almost there. You're doing great. This thing has been around a long time, you know. All the way back to the first days of man, in fact. He killed so many, terrified so many more, until the Egyptian mystics finally found his spell to keep him at bay. A pretty complex spell, too. My app needs a document about 600 words long to properly cast it, but ever since they figured it out, he hasn't had free reign like he used to. Now he needs a servant to cast a counter spell on any victim before he takes them. That spell's not nearly as complex, though. It only needs about 400 words. And by the way, the end of that sentence, just now, was word 450. They're all yours, Master. Bon appetit. The Blind Child.
Stabbing.
Sylvia pointed a trembling finger at my brother Arthur. Her milky, unseeing eye gleamed in his direction, and his wife Agnes trembled with indignation from across the table. My wife's face colored as she dropped her fork and dragged our daughter back to her bedroom, scolding her as they went. The rest of the night was awkward, and the pep in our conversation never recovered. 2 weeks later, Agnes was stabbed to death in her office parking lot. An inebriated college student found her, almost vomited all over her, and called the cops. My brother swore that he bore no ill will against my daughter, but I can tell he was lying. One day, the middle-aged woman who taught my daughter how to read her braille called me.
Sir, I don't know what's going on, but your daughter's been whispering electrocution, electrocution for the past half hour, and it's starting to distract her from her lessons. Could you please talk to her?
I did. Sylvia, in her 9-year-old lack of understanding, told me that it was just a cool new word she learned at school. The death of an electrician made headlines the following week. It was a freak accident involving tangled wires in a bucket of water. Sylvia's teacher's face was blurred for privacy, but her voice was familiar as anything to me.
He was my partner, my soulmate.
While my wife was working late, I called Sylvia into the living room. Honey, is there anything Daddy should know? She hesitated. Honey, you know you can talk to me. She denied it once more.
I have no secrets from you, Daddy.
My wife walked into the living room with her hair tousled and her eyes distant. Instead of rushing to hug her mom, Sylvia simply turned towards her. Fire, she said. My heart stopped. Every time Sylvia said something like that, it was the person's partner who died, and of that reason too. A fire. Was Sylvia merely making predictions, or was she putting a curse on me for snooping in on her business? Why, this devil child. I grew paranoid, checked the appliances and electronics constantly, and I cleared the house of any fire hazards. That was my life over the next few days. All the while, I kept my eyes on Sylvia. Sylvia. I had grown almost hateful towards my own daughter. My wife came home one night, wounded and blackened with soot, while I sat in the living room and Sylvia listened to the radio beside me. What's the matter? I asked. She gulped.
One of my colleagues. His house caught fire. He was trapped in, but I managed to escape.
That turned the gears in my head. What were you doing at his house? The expression on my wife's face was a sufficient admission of guilt. I opened my mouth to speak, no, to scream, but a smaller voice from beside me looked at me and whispered,
Poisoning.
chooseyourdeath@gmail.com. There's an email address that lets you decide how you want to die. Nobody knows how it works, nobody knows why it's there, but it's there. It works simply. All you have to do is send how you wish to die, and your wish will be granted within 5 days. You don't need to be specific, you don't need to put anything extra, you don't even need to put your info. They'll know. And once you send it, there's no turning back. Did you wish to die from a stabbing? Did you wish to die a hero? Did you wish to die from something inappropriate? Your wish will be granted. People die in their own beds from a hooded figure stabbing them to death, and people die saving others from fires. People die doing something inappropriate. People die. I want to die too. I desperately want it to end. Life is impossible for me to continue to go through, and I don't want to live it anymore. But I'm too much of a coward for suicide, so I went for the better option. I didn't want to die painfully, and I didn't want anyone to mourn over my death. All I wanted was to leave this world peacefully and let everyone else who used to be in my life live their own wondrous lives. So I raised my finger over the keyboard and I typed, I want to die painlessly and not have anyone weep over my death. 1 day passed and I was still alive. 2 days passed and I was still alive. 3 days passed and I was still alive. 4 days passed and I was still alive. The 5th day was the day of the party. I came over to my brother's house along with most of my family. Today was the day of his party. Everyone else was singing and laughing, and yet I sit in the corner on my phone. I should have known it was a scam. I should have known it was fake. All I wanted was to die painlessly. Not have anyone suffer over me. Why wouldn't it happen? Why wouldn't I die? Then I got the notification. And I went pale, realizing my wish came true. You don't need to put any info in the email. You don't need to put any extra details in your email. And you don't need to be specific in your email. But God, I wish I was more specific. I looked up at my family, enjoying themselves and completely unaware of what was about to hit them, as the words ballistic missile burned into my mind. Ears. My girlfriend Leah usually sleeps on her side, giving me perfect access to her ears. Carefully, I squeezed in 2 drops of the poison, no more, because I want the process of the hearing loss to be very gradual, over months. The poison is working. I know by how loudly she's turning up her music she adores so much. She mentions needing to see the doctor today. She has been having to ask her colleagues to repeat themselves louder and louder. There's nothing the doctors can do at this stage. Her hearing loss is unsalvageable, and my clever poison, undetectable. Within a few weeks at most, she will be completely deaf. I go back to learning sign language. It's amazing what you can learn online for free. I need to be ready to support my darling Leah, like the good boyfriend I am. Is it so wrong to want to be the main source of joy in your partner's life? When I look at her face, grimacing in time with that shite she calls music, it feels like a dagger twisting in my heart. And honestly, if Leah's taste in music is so low, better she lose her goddamn hearing. God knows I tried to elevate her. I didn't arrive lightly at this decision. I put on Moonlight Sonata, Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, easy gateways into classical. And she waited patiently for me to explain why they were so great. Then she said,
Claude, you're such a snob. The great thing about music, people enjoy what they do. I don't get why it bothers you so much. I mean, it's not like I'm listening to Ed Sheeran or Katy Perry. Classic rock is great. Everyone knows that. The music of the 90s, it was everywhere. Didn't you listen to Guns N' Roses back in the day?
I felt furious, but I controlled it. I laughed lightheartedly. Axl Rose. Oh, Leah, don't tell me you carry a torch for that fat freak. He's a violent asshole. All those rock guys were just a bunch of violent pedos. I thought you were a feminist. She frowned.
I don't have a crush on Axl Rose, and it's actually quite unfeminist to fat shame. And I never said I approve of their lifestyle, I just like their songs.
I think that puts you in a hypocritical position. I tried to keep my bantering tone.
Let's not fight over music, Claude. It's so silly. And thankfully, the good Lord gave us headphones so we don't need to make each other miserable.
And yet, despite headphones, it bothered me. Watching her move her lips and throw her head back and sway from side to side to that music that I was not a part of. If she won't listen to music with me, insisting on being so uncultured, obviously she doesn't deserve to have hearing at all. Salami, olives, sausage. There was nothing special about the pizza place where I worked. It offered your run-of-the-mill dough strategically covered in enough grease to trick your mind into thinking it actually tasted good. There was nothing glamorous about the job. I didn't get to make great discoveries or save lives. It was just a job that paid the bills. As far as bills, my rent was due tomorrow, and my gut clenched, reminding me of my account balance. My tips tonight would determine if I would be paying on time or not. I barely heard the screen chime when an online order came in. One small pizza with salami, olives, and sausage. Simple enough, I thought. I created the artery-killing monster and gave it to the delivery driver, Carl. He glanced down at the address and scoffed.
19 South Street. That's like 2 blocks away. Lazy bastard couldn't just walk over for it.
Hey, delivery gives better tips. Remember, you owe me half, I said, and wondered if the desperation came through in my voice. Carl turned and waved his hand in the air, like a child waving off a nagging mother trying to remind her son to wash behind his ears. He wasn't gone 10 minutes before he was back, pizza box still in his hand.
Lazy bastard didn't even open the door. I tried calling. No answer. Want to split it?
I eyed the pizza. As sick as I was of it, I had barely eaten today. Yeah, sure.
What was on it?
Salami, olives, and sausage.
Ugh, never mind. It's all yours.
I shrugged and broke the seal on the box. It was a sticker that promised and lied about only using fresh ingredients. I took a small bite into the first piece. It was salty, and the toppings an overwhelming choice. It felt good in my stomach, filling me up more than my lunch of ramen had. As I walked home that night, the pizza wasn't setting quite as well as it had been. Too much junk, I told myself. Not enough food. My stomach turned harder when I saw the flashing lights ahead of me. 5 police cars and an ambulance in front of a small house. My walking slowed as I got closer. A group of people had gathered around the police tape, warded off by the force field of yellow and black lines. I walked to the nearest group of people and motioned towards the house with a nod of my head. An old lady near me sighed.
Boyfriend held his girlfriend hostage inside, snapped, and killed her when she tried to escape. God rest her soul, she was just a young thing.
I looked back at the crime scene, noticing the house number beneath a smear of blood. My breath caught in my throat as I struggled not to choke. My eyes watered. 19 South Street. The same house that had ordered the pizza. Salami, olives, sausage. There is no off switch. Intertech has announced its latest revolutionary product, the Workday chip. With this product, a person can go the whole workday and not even know it. It automatically initiates a sleep sequence in the user's brain, then controls their muscles so that they can do their job while completely unconscious. All a person's energy can now be put to things that really matter: hobbies, friends, family. They never really have to think about work again, unless they're picking up their paycheck. Soon this chip became a regular part of life. Some companies even started giving them out completely free for employees. It was a win-win. The companies got more efficient workers, and the employees no longer had the stress of the job. You could hardly even tell a person was unconscious. The chip recognized patterns and could converse just like the user would. For a while, this seemed like the perfect system. 3 years after the implementation of the Workday chip, the disease broke out, nicknamed the Red Flame Disease. It caused a terrible combination of coughing up blood and intense burning pain. It spread like wildfire, and soon the majority of the population was affected. Even though most people were in no state to work, the chips forced them to automatically. There was no off switch, and it was able to pick locks and break down doors in order to get the user to work. In the end, it didn't matter if the person had the chip or not. Everyone ended up dead. From the moment you first coughed up blood, you had a mere days left to live. The disease didn't discriminate between the old and the young. Every single person eventually succumbed. It all happened so quickly that most bodies never even got taken care of. They were just left in their homes to rot away. Now roaming the streets are corpses, doing nothing but going through the motions as if they were ghosts. Dead baristas try to ask customers that don't exist for their order, but some no longer have tongues. Shriveled hands work in factories to produce gadgets for nobody. Businessmen look before crossing the street on their way to work, but no longer have any eyes. These ghost-like beings are stuck in a strange purgatory. They're dead, but not at peace. Watching over these ghosts are the CEOs, the top 1%. They live in elevated bunkers and clink glasses, laughing about how they will never have to pay another worker again. The Workday chip has no off switch, and that's exactly how it was meant to be.
Time travel. The year was 2082 when we first noticed them. Objects that seemed like probes, sent to transmit their locations for decades in space and popping up everywhere from Mercury to Pluto. After a few years, the probes changed. They had messages from the future. Apparently, the secrets of time travel will be unlocked in 50 years. The only problem is compensating for the movements of planets, solar systems, and even the galaxy, as nothing bigger than a single person can be sent. Until technology and math is developed, 50 years back is the limit. The messages urge us to properly log the locations of the probes. But then the probes stopped. 10 years after the last one was found near Titan, the bodies arrived. Tens of billions, nearly double the entire population of the solar system. One person managed to arrive near the surface of a colony on Mars' moon Phobos. Only half their torso was above ground. Before succumbing, the bystanders were able to ask why everyone was traveling in time blindly. "You'll see," they said before dying. "You'll see."
My girlfriend is always comparing me to her ex-boyfriend. So I've been with my girlfriend Chloe for the last 2 years. We're in a really happy relationship, and I've even considered marrying her in the near future. The only issue I have with her is that she's constantly comparing me to her ex-boyfriend Mark. It is really annoying, and it is starting to hurt my feelings. If I ever do something wrong, then she would always point out that Mark wouldn't have made the same mistake. I know that they were childhood sweethearts and were together for over 10 years, but I really think she needs to stop doing this. She always gives me the silent treatment afterwards when I ask her to stop, which always makes me feel like I did something wrong. It is really starting to get on my nerves, so I decided to organize a meeting between the three of us and let her choose which one she wants. I knew she would be home late on Sunday evening, so I decided that was the perfect day for the meeting. Me and Mark were sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. I could see the look of shock on her face when she saw him. She fainted on the ground, and I knew that she wanted Mark. I decided I would stand aside and let them be together. I placed Mark's rotting corpse back into his grave and then carefully lowered Chloe on top of him before closing the coffin. I started throwing the dirt on top of the grave so that no one would ever know that it was disturbed. I could hear Chloe's screams of what I assume were joy as she was finally reunited with the love of her life. I felt horrible that we were breaking up, but I didn't want to stand in the way of true love. My son's voice doesn't echo. My son's voice doesn't echo. It's true, his voice doesn't have an echo. He was around 4 years old when we noticed it. We had been at the park playing, and on our way home we passed through a tunnel. I've always found echoes very funny, so I shouted, "Yabba dabba doo!" really loud. It bounced back right away. It made my son giggle. He shouted something, but it didn't bounce back. It was all flat. I looked at my wife. She didn't seem to notice. "Come on, buddy, try again, louder," I said to him. So he did, but it made no difference. His voice didn't echo. I found it quite odd, but we didn't talk about it. That night, my wife locked herself in the bathroom for hours. I could hear her sobbing in there, but she wouldn't let me in. The years passed, and my wife decided to homeschool our son, since she was a teacher, and I didn't argue with her on that. "Other kids can be so cruel," she said when we discussed different educational options. "I know what's best for him." Our son didn't have any friends, and my wife was sort of overprotective of him. He only spent time with us. He was an only child, and me and my wife had a difficult time conceiving, leading us in on IVF treatments. After some excruciating months, we finally found out that she was pregnant. 9 months later, he was born. It wasn't just that his voice didn't echo that made him different. One night, when we practiced his reading skills, I started making shadow figures on the wall. I made various animals, and my son thought it was hilarious. He wanted to try as well, and I helped form his grip into a moose figure, and he placed his hands in front of the lamp, and I gasped. Nothing. My son didn't have a shadow. This couldn't be real. I knocked on the bathroom door to tell my wife my latest discovery, and she was in there again. She had been crying a while ago, just like every other night the past years. Now all I hear was silence. I called her, asked if everything was okay. No answer. I got up and grabbed the screwdriver. After minutes of struggle, I finally managed to get the door open. I found my wife, laying in our bathtub. The water was dyed red from her cuts. Beside her laid a little note. It said, "To my husband, forgive me. I can't continue living this lie. Our son is dead. He died of cancer when he was 2. Your doctors told me it was your way of coping with the loss of him, and that it would go away. But it never did. You still believe that he exists. It breaks my heart to pretend that he's with us every day. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry." The Old Man in the Well. Keith was 12 the first time the old man in the well spoke to him. Keith was out playing after dark on the family's small farm near the well. The old well had beams supporting a rope and pulley with a bucket attached, even though Keith was told that the well ran dry before he was born. Suddenly, he heard someone say his name in a low, raspy voice. "Keith." Keith whirled around and saw no one. A look of confusion spread across his face as he heard it again. "Keith." This time it was said with more force and a bit louder. "Keith." The voice sounded like one of those old farmers who liked to smoke, thought Keith. Looking down the well, Keith heard the same voice asking,
"Have you got anything tasty?"
Keith couldn't see anything past the first 12 or so feet down the well, even though it was a full moon. "Who are you? How'd you get down there?" Keith asked.
"If you give me something tasty, I'll reward you,"
replied the voice. All Keith had were some cookies he had stuffed into his pockets before he left to play. He put those in the bucket and lowered it. He had lowered it nearly 40 feet, and it was literally at the end of the rope when he could no longer feel the weight of the bucket on the rope. 20 seconds passed, and he felt the weight of the bucket again, and began to pull it up. As he finished pulling the bucket up to the top, he heard the voice say,
"No nice."
Keith saw a reflection in the bucket and saw a rectangular piece of silver metal, about the size of an army dog tag. It was completely flat and smooth.
"Want fresh?"
the voice said. Even though Keith tried to talk to the old man again, there was no response. Keith made up a story about where he found the metal and took it to his father, who took it to the town and confirmed that it was an ounce of pure silver. After that, Keith kept it a secret. It took a while to discover the old man was only there the night of full moons. Keith quickly learned that only live things he put in the well would be rewarded, but only once for each item and once per full moon. So, one of each kind of animal was lowered down into the well and rewarded. Keith now had a cigar box mostly full of silver pieces by the time he was 16, but had run out of different animals to get rewarded for. It was around the time that the local farmhand went missing. It was also the same time that Keith was rewarded with gold pieces for the first time. Once Keith took over the farm, temp workers seemed to vanish every now and then without explanation from the farm. The old man had finally found something tasty enough to always reward. He didn't have a warrant.
LAPD, open up.
I'd fallen asleep on a couch again. I didn't appreciate the sudden interruption, and I doubly didn't appreciate the first 4 letters it began with. Even though I didn't remember doing anything wrong, cops still filled me with dread. I staggered to the door and unlocked it. There he was, one cop, tall, thin, pale, and blonde. "Can I help you, officer?"
"We're looking for a suspect in the neighborhood. May I come in?"
I blinked. "The suspect isn't in here," I said.
"I didn't imply they were. I'd just like to ask you some questions."
"You can ask from here." He sighed and pulled out a notepad and pen. He asked what I'd been doing for the last 2 hours, and I told him I'd drifted off while watching some horror movie, and I was fast asleep when he pounded on my door.
"You're sure you didn't see anything at all?"
"Positive." He fidgeted, staring past me into my apartment.
"I'd really like to ask you some questions inside."
"Sir, unless you have a warrant," I said, "you can't come in. I know my rights. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm just not comfortable inviting people I don't know into my home, even if they are a cop."
"Well, what if I have probable cause? Because I can see you have some marijuana on your coffee table."
I looked over my shoulder. There was, in fact, a pipe on my coffee table. "Then I would remind you that it's 2021, and weed is legal in California," I said. Frustrated, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a faded photograph.
"Last question. Have you seen this woman?"
I squinted. She did seem awfully familiar. Her eyes were so dark it almost seemed like she had no sclera at all, and her messy hair seemed to envelop her narrow shoulders. Though it was merely a photograph, it was like she was looking at me, like sizing me up, from her little paper prison. I reached for the photograph to take a closer look, and that's when he grabbed my arm. His fingers were cold and strong, and I noticed for the first time that each one ended in a sharp nail. They dug into my skin, pricking 5 little points of blood. I yanked back with everything I had, stumbling into my apartment, and he stumbled too. But when he hit the threshold, it was like some invisible force knocked him back. He hissed, showing off glinting fangs. Of course, cops, vampires, both need some kind of invitation. He composed himself.
That will be all. Have a good evening.
He quickly walked away from my apartment. I noticed he did not seem to have any patrol car. He was, however, making his way down my block. I rushed to find my phone. My neighbor Linda, she's got a doormat that says, "Come on in."
How to Scare Dad. My father's the scariest man I've ever known, and when armed with a bottle of beer, he reaches nightmare levels. Just the crackle of his belt or rise in words was enough to make me shake like a leaf. One night, while I struggled to get comfortable in bed from the bruises and sounds of my mom crying, I hatched an ingenious idea to stop the pain and suffering. Scare Dad. Clearly he just didn't know how his actions made us feel, but if I scared him like he scared us, maybe then he would change his ways. I tried anything I could think of to produce some fright and scare Dad straight. I would hide and jump out at him, but he didn't even flinch. I'd place a toy snake in the toilet, but that only resulted in a beating for me. Finally, I thought of destroying his alcohol. I know that people become scared when they lose something they love, so one by one, I poured my dad's bottles down the drain and eagerly awaited his reaction. I knew this would be it. This would be the thing to scare him. That night, I remember my father discovering the empty bottles and becoming angrier than I've ever seen him. I remember him wrecking the house. I remember him storming into my room. I remember his hands around my neck and me seeing black. Luckily, my planning and hard work that night paid off. Today, my father lives in a constant state of fear. I'm always watching him, how timid and nervous he is at all times. Whenever I pay him a visit, his complexion turns pasty white, his body shivers like I used to, and he breaks into a cold sweat. I scared my father so good, you would think he saw a ghost.
The Gray Lady. Have you guys ever heard of the Gray Lady? I remember hearing some campfire stories of her when I was a kid, but I haven't been able to find much information about her. Here's what I remember. Supposedly people see her in remote places, mountaintops, deep forests, out in the country. She appears to be an old, very tall, thin woman, and she wears a long gray dress. People report seeing her during times of great physical duress, usually when the witness believes himself to be close to death, and almost exclusively when the witness is alone in the situation. They say she always has this big smile. I found this story online a few years ago about a hiker who got lost in British Columbia and saw her. Everything is true here, but I kind of hope this isn't. I'd already been out there for about 4 days, doing some off-trail hiking, and I had a great time. I used to love going out to the woods by myself. I like the solitude. I must have gotten turned around. I didn't end up back where I wanted to be at what was supposed to be the end of my trip. I later found out that I had been going in the almost complete opposite direction of my car. It was about 3 days after I was supposed to be home. I was just trying to get out of there when I started to see things. Just on the edge of my vision, shadows. I'd look and there'd be nothing there. At night I would hear noises outside my tent. At first I thought it was just animals, and I'm sure some of the sounds were, but others... I heard scratching, and sometimes late at night I'd wake up to hearing breathing. Not like any animal. I'd call out thinking that maybe someone was there, but I'd never get an answer. This went on for a few days. I thought maybe it was just the woods getting to me. You hear horror stories about hunters who get lost and start hallucinating, or who die of thirst with water in their packs. The forest can mess with you, but about a week after I got lost, I saw her off in the distance, maybe 200 yards. hands at her side, and she was tall, 6 or 7 feet, with her head craned downwards like she was deformed or something. But she was still looking at me. She wore this dirty dress that hung down to the ground. I called out, but she still didn't do or say anything. I started running towards her. I was scared, but by then I was worried that I wasn't going to make it out of the woods. I got maybe 100 feet, but she stepped behind a tree, and when I got up there, I was just alone. I don't know where she could have gone. The next couple of days I didn't see anything, and the nights were quiet. I just kept following the creek, hoping to find something, anything. I ran out of food on the 10th day, and that night I woke up, not sure what time it was, to laughing outside. A low giggle. It lasted for a few seconds. Had I dreamed it? I opened the flap of my tent and called out, but all I could hear was the sound of running water, which was strange. There should have been bugs, deer, wind, something, but it was just so quiet. Then a loud snap from about 20 feet away. I shined my flashlight and I saw her there, half hidden, poking out from behind a tree, grinning at me. I got a better look at her than I did before. She was old. Her hair was done up in a bun, and her face was distorted. Her nose was too long and crooked, and her eyes were too close together, too big, black. We stared at each other for a long time, and when I called out to her, her grin just got wider. I just sat there, frozen, looking at her. I yelled again. I asked her what she wanted, and she just laughed. This scratchy, painful laugh. Then she stepped out of the light, and I couldn't find her again. The rest of the night I heard things outside. Even the constant bubbling of the creek scared me. I wanted out. I was hungry, exhausted, and scared for my life. I truly believed that I was going to die in these woods. At first light, I set out, walking as fast as I could away from the campsite. Sometimes in the late afternoon, I came across an old logging road. It didn't look like it had been used in years, and I knew that it didn't mean that I was safe yet, but still, seeing that sign of humanity, it was the happiest moment of my life. It was getting dark, and I felt like I was going to pass out, but I didn't want to stop. I don't think that I could have slept anyways. Somehow I found the energy to keep going. About 2 hours after I started following the road, it was pitch black out, and it started to rain. I'd been lucky enough to have good enough weather for my trip, but within a few minutes it was pouring. I was plodding along as fast as I could when I heard footsteps behind me. I'd stop and listen, and they would stop too. I'd start walking, and I'd hear them again. A few times I thought I could see her, stopped not too far behind me. And more than once I heard her laughing, that disgusting laugh. It was almost dawn when I came to the top of the hill and saw lights. Lights, mankind, civilization. I practically fell down the hill, stumbling to the door of a small house. I must have looked like some kind of monster, dirty, wet, and exhausted, but they took me in. It was an old couple. They gave me some food and a bed to sleep in. I woke up and they told me that I had slept for 15 hours. I told them about the woman I saw. As nice as they were, I could tell that I was making them uncomfortable. They told me it was just the hunger, but I know what I saw, out there, deep in the woods. And I'll never forget the laughing. Confession. You okay, buddy?
Yeah.
You sure? You're breathing heavy.
I'm okay.
Good. Relax. It'll go quicker that way. To start, I just need some basic information.
Basic?
Simple things.
Okay.
Let's start with an easy one. What's your name?
Roy.
Roy what?
Fromere.
Well, Mr. Fromere, how old are you?
16.
You go to school?
No.
Why not?
Dunno. Just don't.
You live alone?
No.
You live with your mother and your brother Bill, don't you?
Yeah.
Good. You're doing fine, but now I need to ask you some harder questions, okay? Can you handle that?
Yeah.
Good boy. Your brother Bill's in some hot water, isn't he? He's been accused of some bad things.
Accused?
He did something bad to that little girl, Jenny Connor.
Oh.
To be frank, Mr. Fromere, I think you might know something about that. That's why you're here today. I think you have a story about Bill and that little girl. Don't be shy. Relax, you aren't in any trouble. Just answer me one question. Did you see Bill and Jenny go into the woods?
I didn't see them.
Really?
I saw Jenny. Bill was home.
You say you saw Jenny go into the woods, but Bill was at home?
Yeah.
Mr. Fromere, I find that a wee bit hard to believe. You know, we found Bill's jacket in those woods. We found his jacket soaked in about a pint of blood, Jenny's blood. And we found her too. Funny enough, she was just a few yards away. We took some pictures. You want to see them?
Pictures?
Of the body. You want to see them?
No.
No, I expect you don't. They're not pretty. But nevertheless, they beg the question. What was Jenny's blood doing on Bill's jacket? And why do a dozen witnesses claim to have seen them leave together from the football game?
Witnesses?
Mr. Fromere, I know you followed them from the field. We have it on CCTV. So I ask you again, did you see Bill take Jenny into the woods? Did you?
I didn't.
I think you're lying.
Bill was home. We'd go together from football. Bill said, take Jenny home.
You took Jenny?
It was cold. Bill said, take Jenny and take my jacket. I said, let's go to the woods. Jenny said no, and it made me mad. I pushed her. She hurt her head.
What?
I hit her in the woods. I was scared. I didn't want trouble. She woke up. She was mad and screaming, so I hit her. I hit her so she shut up.
And the jacket?
Jacket.
Bill's jacket.
I hid it.
Where?
Under my bed?
Christ, no, not under your bed. Think, for once in your life, fucking think. You hid it in the woods.
And I hid it in the woods.
Yeah, don't forget, it's important.
Sorry.
When they ask for real, you have to remember. I'm sorry for yelling. I hate seeing you made a fool of is all.
I know, Bill.
One, two, buckle my shoe. Daddy, are you gonna work? Come home soon, okay?
My 5-year-old daughter smiled at me as I put my shoes on and headed to work. I hugged her and I kissed her on her forehead, promising that I'd see her soon. If I didn't have to pay the bills, I'd have loved to just stay home with her. After the death of my wife, the only thing that kept me going was my daughter. I don't know what I would do if I lost her too.
3, 4, shut the door.
Gone. Missing. Found dead. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it when the police came knocking at my door, breaking the tragic news to me. I slammed the door shut, denying the truth. She couldn't be dead. She was so young. Too young. Still so full of life. How sick in the head could you be to murder a child?
5, 6, pick up sticks.
Sharpen sticks. I sharpen them myself, one by one, making sure that each stick is perfectly pointed. They didn't seem to appreciate it as much as I did, though, screaming and begging as the sticks pierced their skin and flesh.
Please! No!
It's a bloody mess. It wasn't enough to kill them. I made sure of it. After all, I still needed them alive for the next part.
7, 8, lay them straight.
I laid them all in a row on a pile of sticks, all 5 of them. They seemed terrified, knowing what's coming next. I poured gasoline on them and I threw a lit matchstick.
No, please! Let's go!
The fire caught onto them so quickly. Screams of agony echoed through the air as their bodies withered in pain. They begged for mercy, their bodies burning to ashes. It reeked of burnt flesh, yet it smelled like sweet revenge to me. They deserved it, those cultist fuckers. They never showed any mercy when they did the same thing to my wife and daughter, nor to any of those women in my neighborhood they kidnapped. All for the sake of their twisted cult ritual. Well, I guess they aren't so happy now that the sacrifice is them, huh? I know there are more of them out there, and I can't let them ruin someone else's family like they ruined mine.
9, 10, begin again.
Side effects may include. It was past 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I was sitting on the couch in my living room, the TV passively playing in the background, waiting for even the slightest wave of exhaustion to hit me. I had to be up at 7, yet no matter how hard I tried, sleep never came. My eyes were closed, trying to find a comfortable thought to drift off to, when I heard an ad on my TV.
Are you struggling with insomnia?
Something about that simple phrase caught my attention, and I bolted straight up, staring at the television.
If you're tired of agonizing sleepless nights, try periazepam.
Even though I knew this was just a generic sleep aid commercial, it felt strangely targeted to me.
Side effects may include paranoia.
What if it actually was targeting me? The screen showed a man making coffee, but it felt like he was actually watching me.
Headaches.
Seeing the man on the screen hurt now. His stare felt like it was burning my brain. I closed my eyes, which soothed the pain a little bit.
Disorientation.
The darkness felt like it was consuming me. I was dizzy and nauseous, and I wanted to open my eyes, but I didn't even know if I could.
Auditory hallucinations.
The man was now whispering my name, over and over. I wish he would stop. I wanted to tear out my eardrums, anything, for a moment of silence.
And memory loss.
I just needed to sleep. That was the problem. I managed to open my eyes and stumble into my kitchen. I'm about to grab a bottle off the shelf, but find it's already on the counter. I pour out 2 pills and go grab myself a glass of water to swallow them with, but there's a glass already there, still half full. Strange as it is, I take my pills. I manage to make it back to my couch and try to wait for the pills to kick in. The now half-empty bottle of periazepam still sits on my counter. It's past 4 a.m., and I can't sleep. I hear an ad on the TV that makes me sit straight up.
Are you struggling with insomnia?
I have an exam on Thursday. I've been studying for 2 hours straight. I have an exam on Thursday. I've done the math, and I need to get at least an 85 on this exam to boost my total mark up to 80%. I have to get most of my studying done tonight because I have work tomorrow. I'm a barista. The job isn't too bad. I like my coworkers. My manager can be a bit harsh sometimes, and I wish I was paid a little bit more, but still, there's worse jobs that I could be working. I think I deserve a break. I close my laptop and I pick up my phone. I leave it on the other side of my room when I study. It just helps me focus better. My mom has texted me. She's asked me if I've seen the news about France. She's worried because she still has friends and family there. I haven't heard the news. I open up Instagram to see what she's talking about. It's at the top of my feed. The Prime Minister of France has announced that the country's full military power will go towards stopping the flesh creatures. They're very concerned, seeing as the creatures recently took control of Toulouse. Apparently 11 million people across Europe and Asia have already been killed, and the number increases faster every day. I sigh. I knew bioengineering a new breed of humans was a bad idea. I even signed a petition against it when it was proposed 6 months ago. What could people really do with night vision, higher intelligence, and an improved sense of smell anyways? It always seemed a bit dumb to me. I hope the government can fix things before they get too out of control. I'm sure everything will be fine. It's not like I can do anything about it. I put my phone down, ready to study again. I pull open my laptop and click the next series of questions. I have to finish studying tonight. I have work tomorrow. I don't like my manager. I'm worried that flesh creatures will make their way to North America. Experts say that they might be able to swim here before the end of the week. I just want an 80 on this course. I need an 85% or higher on this exam. My exam is on Thursday, and I have to get through Thursday. And then I can relax. That concludes this week's session at the Nightmare Lab. If you enjoyed this episode, click the like button and comment below. If you have your own twisted tale that you'd like narrated on our channel, submit it through the form in the description. Become a part of our sinister collective by subscribing. Be here next week for another concoction to feed the nightmare.
Are you struggling with insomnia? If you're tired of agonizing sleepless nights, try periazepam. Side effects may include paranoia, headaches, disorientation, auditory hallucinations, and memory loss.